Everyone wants to be the hero in a dungeon, but he's the one who actually gets them out alive. Just a sherpa who reads the dungeon like a map, knows when to move and when to stop, every trap, every path, every mistake that gets people killed. There's no room for error. He has a little sister, and also high stamina and sharp instincts. And when top-tier adventurers start relying on him, the porter becomes the most important person in the party. The story begins in the Tyros dungeon. The deeper they go, the more everything is consumed by darkness. A battle fueled by despair is already near. Several people met the Lord of the Undead, a demon lich, in this dungeon. One of them thought that the undead are the strongest type of monster. This monster summoned its minions, and the people loudly said that it keeps summoning monsters one after another. There is no end to them. What should they do? They called for the princess, and she said that if they want to defeat it, they must continue the onslaught. A team member thought that with her black curly hair fluttering in the wind, she continues to fight with despair, as if this is her last battle. Her name is Yuika, the Black Princess. A dungeon sherpa is a specialized class that helps carry adventurers' luggage and acts as their guide on the path of exploring and conquering the dungeon. 20 days before, in the Tyros dungeon, at a depth of the 20th floor, a team of people were fighting against huge golems and loudly said that they can't waste any more time. They must act together. He escaped. What are the tanks doing? When the mage was attacked by one of these monsters, he used the lightning strike spell and defeated the monster. Later, near the underground oasis, they began to rest, and one of them loudly cursed what was happening. The mage drank a mana potion, and someone asked how many potions he had already drunk. What a waste of mana. He turned to him and said that he could not do anything about it. This vanguard is useless. The swordsman was indignant at this and loudly asked what he was saying. He raised his staff with a smile and asked if he had forgotten what just happened. They started arguing with each other. A guy came to them and asked, "Are they arguing again?" Everything is fine as long as they don't separate them, right? The tired team members said that if he wanted to separate them, he should try. He was too tired to get involved in this. The guy with the big backpack sighed and thought that nothing could be done about them. The dungeon sherpa, Ro, walked up to them and said that the two of them should listen. Shouting like that was dangerous because the monsters could hear them. They turned to him and loudly said that he didn't remember seeing him during the fight. Where was he even? It was that damned sherpa. He said with a smile that he went off to collect some valuable herbs. The swordsman asked in a displeased tone, "Isn't it cool to be a sherpa? He doesn't have to fight monsters. What an easy way to earn money." The mage said with a smirk that it would be a problem if they got injured now, so he should quiet down. The protagonist said that if he ran out of potions, he could give them a couple. He took out several potions and said that none of them were diluted with water, so they were all of high quality. They were surprised by this and said that it was a healing potion. It will restore their wounds. It is a restoration potion, the best choice for replenishing fatigue. He even has a strength potion. The wizard asked with a smirk, however, it is not free, right? He handed them a price list. They were very surprised by what they read and asked loudly, "Are the prices twice as high as the market prices?" The swordsman grabbed him by the collar and loudly asked, "Is he kidding them? He is scamming them." He calmly asked him to calm down and said that he would inform them. For a dungeon, it is quite cheap. Even if they decide to return to the surface now, they will not be able to avoid clashes with monsters. Moreover, if that happens, their equipment will be damaged, and they will have to pay an even higher price. If they buy it from him, it will save them time and money. One of the party members thought that they didn't even have enough stamina to go to the surface. The swordsman, with a dissatisfied expression, asked loudly, "So is this a victory for him, or will they all die?" MC apologized and said that the price is not negotiated. However, this is the type of thing that is not simply sold on the market because it is perfect for high-level adventurers. The party members called the leader and said that they should buy it. As high-level adventurers, they should use high-level items. He should stop acting like a barbarian. It's not worth it. He finally calmed down, let him go, and said that this time he will get away with it. However, he will never hire him again. Ro said with a smile that he is grateful for their cooperation. Later, he thought that the city of Tyros. This city was built right after the dungeon was found. It is a city of adventurers. He came to the Sherpa Guild. A woman was sitting behind the counter and greeted him. He called her an old hag and said that he was home. She asked with a wide smile how everything went with the unruly gang. He thought about it and said that, as she said, they were all seasoned adventurers. They were unruly, as they were called. In terms of strength, they were quite well balanced. For some reason, it seemed to him that they could hold out there for a long time. However, they said that they would not hire him anymore. She, with a slightly dissatisfied look, said that he was already the third. It seemed that if he hadn't coped, hiring others would be useless. He went on and said that he would submit the report tomorrow. He needed to pick up his younger sister. She asked if he had left her with relatives again. Things weren't easy for him. After that, he came to another street, met Marie and called her by name. She ran up to him with a happy expression on her face, hugged his leg and said, "Welcome back." She jumped when the door opened, and the man from there called him and said that he was finally back. The protagonist called Murao and said that he was grateful that she always took care of his sister. He handed her the money and said that he would let her know if he needed her help again. She slammed the door and said that she didn't know whether she was shy or what, but she was not nice at all. He didn't pay attention to it, patted her on the head and said that they should go home. By the way, maybe they should pack lunch and go for a picnic in the forest? She held his hand and asked if they were going to pick gazi fruits. He agreed and said that it was just harvest season. They could pick some and make a lot of jam. She laughed with a happy expression on her face and said that they hadn't gone on a picnic for so long. He looked at her with a smile and thought that a Sherpa never fights monsters. However, you never know what can happen in a dungeon. It's risky work, surrounded by danger. There's always a chance that he won't come back. His little sister, who is only 4 years old, understands this. They reached the house and he said that they would have stew for dinner. She was happy about this and said that he should let her help. The next day, he came to the Sherpa Guild, wished good morning and said that he brought a report on the dive. He was surprised when he saw a man at the door who said that he was waiting for him. After all, he was his favorite, outstanding student. He was waiting for him. He should let him tell about the wonderful work he found. MC closed the door in front of him and said that when he smiles and talks like that, it usually means he wants to involve him in some difficult work. He began to sweat from nerves and said that he had asked him for many things, but this time it was different. They have an important person from the royal capital here. He nevertheless opened the door and looked at him suspiciously, and the man said that this time, the employer was a member of a famous group from the royal capital. Yuika entered the hall and he said that this was the Twilight Sword. He looked at her in surprise and asked, "This is the one that is rumored in the guild, right?" After receiving a positive answer, he thought that as is known, they have cleared countless dungeons, the most famous of which are the most difficult in terms of actual strength. In the list of adventurer groups that are published once a month, they always rank at the top. They are also called the Heroes of the East. Rumors said that their leader is a beautiful, black-haired girl who is under 22 years old. As he understands, this will be their order. She introduced herself and said that she aims to clear the Tyros dungeon. Could he help her achieve this? He thought that today, it was known that this dungeon extends 47 floors down. The maximum the last floor could reach was 53. To clear the entire dungeon, they must reach and clear the last floor. Clearly, this was all because the guild leader Gunji and the former guild leader Gima had demanded it of him. Accompany the adventurers into the deepest, unexplored parts of the dungeon. This meeting marked the beginning of a remarkable adventure. However, they still didn't know what truly lurked at the very bottom of the dungeon. It was true darkness, leading the hero's party into the deepest parts of the dungeon. Such a task was a great honor for a dungeon Sherpa. Ro raised his hand with a smile, thanked her for the offer, and said that he was scared, however, and therefore had to decline. Diving into the unexplored parts of the dungeon would take a long time, wouldn't it? He couldn't be gone for that long. Jima laughed and said that maybe she could train his sister to be a Sherpa while he was gone. He, with an indignant expression, said loudly that he wasn't joking. She called him Little One and asked if he was saving up to take care of his sister, right? That's why he became a Sherpa. After all, it was a very profitable business in this city. He should be happy, because the reward this time was even greater than what he would receive in a year. Now, it seemed like he had no objections, right? He took the dive plan from her, read it, and thought that if he received this reward, Marie would be able to go to school. Besides, it won't be a very long dive, right up until they completely clear the dungeon. They're only going on 3 short-term dives, which is enough for him to accept the offer. He said that, by the way, he doesn't see any other groups listed besides theirs. Yuika said that Twilight Sword is a group that acts alone. While it's common for normal groups to go into unknown parts of the dungeon together, for them, other groups are too slow, which in turn increases the risk of being ambushed by monsters. However, Twilight Sword is a 4-person group, and they've cleared quite a few similar dungeons in the past. Twilight Sword is a group that's strong enough to rival several major league groups at once. This is how they've always operated, and how they plan to operate in the future. The protagonist said that he briefly familiarized himself with the dive plan. He introduced himself, extended his hand, and said that he accepted their request. She extended her hand in response, and said that then he could call her by her first name. He said that he looked forward to working with her. She shook his hand with a friendly smile and said that the feeling was mutual. He was surprised because he did not expect her to smile. She said that she would gladly set out right away, but she needed to replenish her supplies of tools and potions. Could he recommend a good shop? He agreed and asked, but she wanted to go to a shop popular among adventurers. She said that because they are famous in these circles, they have no access to such places, so much so that she can't even take a full breath. She would like to avoid all of this today. He said that popularity is sheer pain. He thought that it's not easy being a celebrity. He said that he should clarify. Preparing equipment is a separate fee. She said that it doesn't matter. She will leave everything to him. After that, they walked around the city and bought various necessary things. He said that they finally bought everything they needed. She thanked him, and he asked, by the way, if she would mind having dinner with him. His little sister would also be there. Yuika didn't mind and agreed to it. Later they came to his house. Marie met them, introduced herself, and said that she is 4 years old. She called him by name and asked if this was his daughter. He said that this was his sister. Even though there was almost a 20-year difference between them, she could just call her by her first name. She sat in front of her, greeted her with a friendly smile, introduced herself, and said that she would work with her brother. He confirmed this and said that they would be diving together starting tomorrow. After that, they came to a restaurant. The waiter brought them dishes and thanked them for waiting. Mari said in a joyful voice that it would taste better if she ate it like this. She looked at her and thanked her for the advice. MC looked at them and thought that he hadn't seen her act like this for a long time. When he decided to take her to dinner at a restaurant, he couldn't even imagine that they would get along so well. The waiter brought him ale, and Yuika asked if it was beer. He agreed and said that it went well with the local food. Would she like to drink it? She said that even when she turned 16 and was allowed to drink, she had never tried alcohol before. He offered her juice, and when it was brought, she started drinking her juice and said in a satisfied voice that she really liked this juice. He was about to say something about it, but she quickly drank it, raised her hand, and asked for a mug of ale. She started drinking alcohol and said that she was already 20 years old. Of course she could drink beer. He was surprised that she drank the whole mug in one go, but immediately after that, she felt worse. The next morning, she woke up in bed and wondered if it was morning already. It wasn't clear from here. It didn't look like her room. She had a headache and thought she remembered having dinner with him and his little sister. Yuika remembered how, yesterday, when she drank a mug of ale, she hugged Mari and told her she was so cute. She sat her on her lap, started stroking her head, and said she was like an angel. She should call her sister again. At the moment, she felt very embarrassed about it, grabbed her head and wondered what she had done. What was with that bitter drink that it knocked all the sanity out of her? She was so sweet. So she tried to be a good sister. She heard their voices, saw his things, and wondered, was she in their house? She put on her shoes, went to leave the room, and thought that in any case, she should apologize for all the inconvenience. She left the room. Ro was washing the dishes, noticed her, and said hello. Marie approached her, bowed, and also greeted her. Yuika greeted her with a little embarrassment and thought that she was still cute. She knelt in front of her and said that she apologized for her behavior yesterday. It seemed that her actions were quite inconvenient for her. He put the plates with food on the table and said that everything was fine. She would have just run away if she felt uncomfortable. She sat so obediently on her lap only because she really liked her. They should all have breakfast together. She, with a slightly confused look, said that she could not accept this invitation. However, when Marie suggested it, she gladly agreed. When they finished eating, she said that she needed to go and get their equipment from the Adventurers Guild. It would be difficult for her to navigate alone, so she asked him to come with her. They left the house, she waved and wished them a safe journey. After that, they came to the guild, where a worried girl loudly asked, did she get drunk, drink beer, and spend the night at this guy's place? She went shopping with him and returned only the next morning. There were no attacks there, right? Yuika, with a puzzled look, said that actually there are no monsters in the city. She said loudly in a worried tone that she didn't mean that. The protagonist, with a slightly confused look, said that he only let her rest at his home. She simply passed out in the shop, nothing more. The girl loudly called him a predator, asked him to shut up, and said that he was fired. He politely introduced himself and thought that it seemed like she misunderstood something. She stood between them with a displeased expression, growling angrily, and she called Barry and said that she should calm down. He was the Sherpa they hired. He thought she seemed to have a sister complex. A man with a serious expression ran up to him very quickly, apologized, and said that ever since she became the Black Princess, she started to react strongly to everything. His name is Nuku. He is a shortstop. MC looked at him with a smile and said that he was glad to meet him. A wizard flew up to him, caught his backpack with his staff, laughed, and said that he would be a good anchor. He is Mazakan, a sage who uses magic for defense and attack. He was very surprised when he heard his name and asked, is he the legendary adventurer who was called a hero for 3 different feats? He laughed, and Barry with an indignant look asked, did he just call him legendary? He is just an old man who retired and came back again. Nuku said that, by the way, this gentleman is her father. He was also over 60 years old and boasted the highest level among the 4 of them. Rue was surprised. He looked so young. Yuika approached him and said that she and Barry were warriors of light. She turned to her and loudly asked, are you sure you want to take him with you? She calmly said that they should discuss these details there in the dungeon. She loudly asked the princess to wait and asked her to reconsider. After some time, they descended into the dungeon, came to a staircase, and the protagonist said that this was a shortcut for adventurers of advanced level and above. It will lead them to the 14th floor. They should be careful, because it is quite slippery here. When they went down, he said that their goal for today was to reach the 47th floor. On their 3rd dive, they will be able to reach the dungeon core. Yuika said that the dungeon core is what produces the monsters in the dungeon. It will give them a huge amount of experience points. Clearing the Tyros dungeon will also raise their level a little. She called him and said that she believed that he knew a shortcut to the next oasis. What floor is it it on. He said it will be on the 19th floor. They should keep in mind that they will encounter a huge number of different monsters on their way. And in the beginning, they will meet monsters that hunt in packs. He listed these monsters and said that silver plates will be the rarest among them. She said with a smile that she understood him. This information was enough for now. She trusted him. After that, she called Barry and Mazakin. They understood her, used magic on him, and she said that it was not that she liked wasting her magic on him, but she had to strengthen his legs, otherwise the whole group would slow down because of him. MC asked in surprise, "Is this strengthening of his legs that increases his speed with the help of her wind magic, right?" She said with a displeased look at the sailboat. "That's what this spell is called. It will take him some time to get used to it." Yuika stepped forward and said that all the remaining floors to the oasis, they will run. She gave the order to move forward, and they all quickly ran forward. He, with a surprised expression on his face, said loudly that it was too fast. It felt like he was just being carried by the wind. He called Mazakin and asked, what was this magic circle that he just drew? He said with a wide smile that it was a silver, oily coating. He should just think of it as oil that covered his body, even though it didn't cover his back, but the rest of his body would repel any physical attacks. He was surprised by this and said that he had never heard of such a cool thing. "By the way, does he swim all the time?" He laughed about it and asked, "He likes to talk, doesn't he? If he keeps talking like this, he'll soon run out of breath." Barry ran forward with a serious expression and thought that if this Sherpa had collapsed from exhaustion, it would have been even better. Ro noticed the tunnel, warned them about it, and she thought that even though he had a calm face now, Nuku called out to the Black Princess and said that they were approaching. 12 overhead and 7 in front of them. Yuika called her name, she took out her daggers and said that the princess could leave everything to her. She jumped forward and thought that soon he would be crying, begging them for rest. She saw apple bees. These are monstrous insects the size of an apple. The acid they spew from their stings can easily dissolve meat. She easily killed these monsters with her daggers, and thought that if he started complaining, she would definitely tell him that he was fired. Yuika was the central link of the Twilight Sword. With her, they could get through anything. One of the monsters ran past the vanguard, and Nuku loudly called out for the Black Princess. They thought that their graceful princess did not need a man. She killed this monster with one blow of her sword and loudly said that they should run on. The protagonist, with a slightly surprised look, thought that the group did not stop for a second. He had never seen anything like this. He looked at the map and said that at the next fork there was a left turn. She said loudly that they should stop. "This passage is sealed. Is he sure it's not a mistake?" He denied it and said that the right path is a dead end. To go down to the next floor, they must go through the snake corridor that is to their left. Yuika called out to her and said that she should just trust him. Nuku called out to her. She immediately understood him and said that it was a trap. They are advancing from the right passage, and it looks like they are blocking their path. Apparently, they want to stop them at all costs. MC looked in that direction and said that they are goblins. She looked at it and said that it looks like these monsters blocked the right tunnel to prevent people from escaping. A crowd of goblins was running towards them, and she, with a calm expression on her face, said that he should hide behind the rock. Nuku called Barry and said that there are about 40 of them there. They should go there. He listened to the advice, hid behind a rock, and said that there were many inconspicuous places here. They should be careful. She said in a calm tone that they could handle it. He called her by name and asked if she really didn't want to go with them. Wasn't she worried at all? She agreed in a calm tone and said that he could leave it to them. They ran closer to the crowd of monsters. He took out several small stones, raised his hand and used the finger bullet skill, shot. He defeated several goblins at once and said that now they should go to the cave that remained there. He continued shooting stones and said that there were 13 monsters left. With a calm expression on her face, she used the wind dance spell, magic that instantly increases the power of the wearer's body. She jumped forward, looked to the side, and said that she found 3. She killed 3 of these monsters at once with a very quick strike of her dagger. She said that she almost grabbed him. She thought that he was also a goblin. There are still some of them who use their heads. He said with a calm expression that they could be in trouble, depending on the extent of their ability to use their heads. She said that she would take care of those on top. The rest of the team peeked out from around the corner, and Ro thought that thanks to the local, fairly light moss, he could see at some distance. Their teamwork was simply stunning. Nuku destroyed the goblins with a shot. Meanwhile, Barry moved towards the goblins, reaching positions that were out of range of the shot. It must be quite dangerous for her to be so close to the shot, but the armor completely protected her. Mazakan said that he had the ability to reflect physical attacks. He thought that in this fight, one could see that the Twilight Sword was using its individual qualities to the maximum. This really is the best team. It must be cool to be the chosen hero. They continued running forward, defeating goblins along the way. She looked down and noticed a necklace around the neck of one of the monsters. She said loudly that she didn't remember killing the goblin with the necklace. Feigning death was useless. He threw a body part of another monster at her. She was forced to dodge and he tried to run away. Nuku used the shot skill and said that he wouldn't let him escape. After that, they called the princess and warned that they were finished. Yuika turned around around, called Mazakan and asked, "He's ready, right?" He said with a smile that the magic circle was already here. He pointed his finger at the protagonist and said that they should take this boy with them. They went further to a place that seemed good to him, and he asked what he was going to do. He created a magic circle in front of him and used the Earth Bridge spell. With this spell, he destroyed the passage in front of him with a very loud sound. He was very surprised because of this, and Barry asked, "What happened?" She was already running. Yuika turned to him and asked, "Next is the labyrinth on the 20th underground floor." He agreed and asked if he should go back and collect the goblin's magic cores. She looked at him and said that it wasn't necessary since it wasn't the best thing to do. A magic core is a mass that forms within a monster's body. Collecting it can give you the experience needed to rank up. She said that as long as they caught up with her and covered her path, it didn't matter if a monster appeared. They should move on, she would lead, and he should keep up. He looked at her with slight surprise, then called Mazakan. He calmly asked what he wanted. MC turned to him and asked if Twilight Sword had a tactic for preserving her strength. He was a little surprised by this and asked why he decided that. He said that he wasn't talking about the team's overall policy. Twilight Sword's formation, given their type of actions and abilities, seemed to him to be a standard plan to operate with 3 fighters in the vanguard. However, in reality, they were set up in such a way that she simply didn't have the space to fight. She didn't even move an inch during the last fight, did she? He chuckled and said that he thought he was an ordinary boy, but it turned out he was quite observant. He thanked him for the praise, and he said that, however, he had already analyzed his true strength. Yuika called his name and said that there was nothing wrong with that. They should make a short stop. They stopped on the 19th underground floor. Barry fell to the ground and said how tired she was. She drank some water, agreed, and said that she had been running since the start, without the slightest pause. She called out to her and said that she had tried so hard in the Tyros dungeon. It felt like she was even more than usual now. She denied it with a confused look and thought that it seemed she should show off her abilities. Ro took out a small potion and asked if she would like to take a recovery potion. He noticed her reaction and did not understand why she was upset. Mazakan said with a smile that this boy seemed to have an interesting idea. He called him by name and asked if he had any other skills besides Prophet, right? He said with a smile that in addition to flight, he also had slow aging. No, Prophet is one of his special abilities. With this, you can find out the nature of an object by directly touching it. It can be used on both people and objects. Yuika said she knew a gift was personal, but if he didn't mind, could he tell me what his gift was? He asked with a slightly displeased look. She already knew about it, right? The only gift he had was stamina restoration. Nuku wiped the sweat from his face and said he'd never heard of such a gift. Barry asked what kind of gift it was. Mazakan said that, roughly speaking, it was hard for him to get tired. The protagonist said that this gift was more common in monsters than in humans. This is what a Sherpa needs, because if he gets tired and wants to rest, they'll abandon him, right? She was very embarrassed by this and said that it didn't make sense. He said with a small smile that this was his gift. Yuika said with surprise that it was wonderful. In the last dungeon, they had to somehow adjust their speed depending on whether the Sherpa was tired or not. This time, they had nothing to worry about, so he can be much stronger with his stamina restored. She's sure everyone wants to see it. He said with a confused look that he's just a Sherpa. What will they do if he runs out of energy? She and Mazakan laughed, and he said that it was expected. MC asked, don't they also become exhausted when their stamina runs out? They also need food and water to stay in shape. She ignored it and asked on what floor the next labyrinth awaits them. He thought that apparently she hadn't been listening to him at all. He looked at the map and said that it was on the 20th underground floor, off the main road. So it would be better to go straight to the 24th floor. They will encounter one there. He listed the many monsters that live there and said that there is also a manticor there. The last monster caught her attention, and he said that it is the king of the local fauna, found only on the 23rd floor. However, it might not be on their way, so they should hurry. She thought it over, agreed with his plan, and said that they would go there. He was surprised by this and said that some monsters were endowed with a gift. Wouldn't it be better to avoid them? Nuku said that it was no problem. He could determine the number of monsters with the gift of enemy locator. If he knew their exact number, it would be easier to deal with them. Ro looked at him and thought that, of course, as he thought, he asked, one way or another, they would follow her suggestion, right? Later, they came to the 23rd floor, and he said that a manticore would be here soon. Moss Nobu also lived here, so they should be careful. They walked nearby and said that the ground here was quite wet. It even seemed a little slippery. Barry stepped in some slime, told them about it, and asked, however, why was it here? He said that he had heard from other Sherpas that they saw a moving labyrinth. It looks like the slime is trying to imitate a labyrinth, doesn't it? Yuika asked if it was possible to use the enemy's search on what they were walking on. Nuku denied it and said that he didn't think there was any gift capable of that. She asked if he knew where the slime was. She walked ahead and said that it was somehow too sticky here. He heard a growl, called out to her, and said that there was a monster ahead. They met a manticore, and she said with a smile that here is the same manticore. That's just right. The protagonist looked at it and asked, I wonder if the manticore always acts alone? If so, then it must be much stronger than the other monsters living on the 23rd floor, and even the monsters of level 35. She drew her sword from its sheath with a smile and said that he should go again and hide behind the rocks. He agreed, started to walk away, and wondered if she would fight this time. She stepped forward and said that they should attack using his poor footing. She and Nuku would aim for the head. She would have to distract the manticore. Barry agreed and said that she thought she would pretend to be stuck. The monster growled loudly, and she used the wind dance and sail spells on her comrades. They both jumped aside, leaving her standing in place, and the monster ran forward. He looked at her in surprise and thought that thanks to the wind dance and sail spells, she was able to jump to the cliff in one bound. He noticed that she was stuck, became worried, and wondered how she was going to fight. When the monster ran very close to her, her allies jumped to an inconspicuous place. Nuku used the shot spell and launched a multitude of stones, which drove the manticore away. The monster stopped, the snake's head opened, and began to concentrate magic in its mouth. Barry looked at this with a surprised expression on her face, and said that this is lightning magic. Mazakan, with a calm smile, also began using magic and said that nothing could be done. He cast the Dirt Bridge spell and created a barrier in front of her, protecting her from the monster's magical attack. Nuku continued to attack from afar, and she pulled out her dagger and said that she would support him. MC watched from behind cover and wondered if Yuika really wasn't going to kill him. Even though it was a manticore, it seemed to him that the Twilight Sword was deliberately trying not to harm him. Based on what she said, it seemed like they were trying to force the monster into stepping on the slime. Even a manticore could get stuck there for at least a second. Did she really want to rig something at this moment? Nuku aimed at the monster and said that he thought at least one of its paws would get stuck. She stood next to him and said that when Barry ran, it was noticeable that she didn't know where to put her foot. It seemed she was trying to avoid the slime, albeit subconsciously. He wondered how to get the manticore stuck. What if he directed it to a place where the slime would be unavoidable? The slime was trying to escape because the manticore had gotten in here. The only way for the slime to get out of here was to squeeze through a narrow passage that the manticore simply couldn't get through. There should have been quite a lot of slime left there by now. The only problem was that now he needed to find that passage, and in such a dark and huge area. He noticed moss flying nearby and thought that there was only one passage leading here, which meant the place the moss was flying from must be a dead end. This meant there was a small gap here that wasn't on the map, if you look at it from both sides. He called out to her loudly and said that there was still a spot here with a lot of slime where the manticore would definitely get stuck. It was behind him, at the base of the wall. She agreed with some surprise, and Nuku said that, however, they hadn't explored those places yet and didn't know anything about it. Barry loudly asked how he knew what was there if he hadn't been there himself. Rose said that wasn't necessary, since they had a map and their experience. He was telling them this as their Sherpa. Yuika was a little surprised by this, then smiled and loudly said that they should chase the manticore in that direction. Her team agreed, and with their attacks, they directed the monster in the direction he pointed. She called out to him and asked where exactly that place was. He ran after her, holding a map in his hand, and said that it was right between the rocks. When they got there, the monster really did end up in a place filled with slime and got stuck there. She realized that this was the right moment, jumped towards the monster, and used the Phantom Needle skill. She pierced the monster's head, jumped back, turned to them, and said with a smile that it was done. He's simply an amazing Sherpa. He thanked her for the praise, looking a little confused, and thought that even though she hit the target, the manticore wouldn't die from just one blow. He noticed the monster behind her starting to rise, called out loudly, and warned her of the danger. The rest of the team stood still, and Nuku calmly said he didn't have to worry about it. He knew the prince's middle name, right? After receiving a negative answer, he said that her middle name was Messenger of the Dead Spirit. She had a gift that allowed her to control creatures she pierced with her sword. The protagonist was surprised by this and saw the manticore kneel before her. Yuika placed her sword on the monster's shoulders and said that she would be called Neko. Barry, surprised, said that was simply the most terrible name in history. Nuku stood next to her and agreed, and he wondered what kind of name that was. She turned to them, stroked the manticore's head, and said that she had a rather useful ability. Let Neko lead. They should move on. So, their destination is the 47th underground floor. Where should they go next? He thought about it and said that it seemed like they should go to the 25th floor. They continued on, and he thought the victories of the Twilight Sword and the manticore were spectacular, worth seeing. Nico captured every monster she encountered, and she used her gift on them, gradually building her own army. Within a day, it already included dozens of monsters. The Twilight Sword's team of monsters. They reached the 40th floor, where they encountered a minotaur. Note, this creature has the body of a man and the head of a bull, possessing exceptional endurance, thick muscles, and high resistance to blows. When this monster was exhausted from fighting other monsters, Yuika approached it and used the Phantom Needle skill. She named it Minoran and said that taming this monster is no easy task. Together with Nico, their task will be to search for enemy positions. They continued walking, and MC thought about how when they first met at the Sherpa Guild, She said that Twilight Sword was a 4-person group strong enough to rival several major league groups at once. When he first heard this, he thought it was simply unreasonable. However, now he has no doubt in their strength. They met 15 skeleton warriors. These are intelligent monsters wielding swords and shields that move in groups. Yuika, with a serious expression, called Neko and Minoran and said that they must deal with the advancing enemy. BU-4 should return to cover. Nuku and Barry should besiege and weaken the enemies that BU-5 and BU-7 eluded. They immediately agreed, and Ro looked on and thought that the powerful abilities of all the party members and the destructive power of the monsters undoubtedly made Twilight Sword the strongest group. His attention was drawn to the skeleton warrior core that fell to the floor, and he thought that there were also monster achievements there. Monster achievements are a type of equipment dropped by defeated monsters. He began to collect them and thought that he should give them all to her. When they finished fighting the monsters, he thought that their ranks had been replenished with 7 skeleton warriors. The number of monsters in the squad now stood at 17. Yuika looked at them with a thoughtful look and said that it seemed it was time to heal the wounds and cheer up the monsters a little. She began to use magic and said that they should all remain in their places. She created a large magic circle over the crowd of monsters and used a healing spell. He was surprised by this and said that he had never seen such a magic circle before. Mazikan said with a smile that it was a gift from the princess. Healing. Usually, only monsters can use such magic on other monsters. He couldn't believe it and wondered, did she also possess such magic? When the spell reached the monsters, their wounds healed very quickly, and he thought it was a synergy achieved by the compatibility of gifts, or a combination. It's called renka. Simply put, the phantom needle is used to manipulate monsters, and healing is used to restore the physical strength of these monsters. This is the best renka. She is the best adventurer, specializing in capturing labyrinths. Yuika turned to them and asked if they should rest now too. Her team members agreed, and he thought it seemed that those who had special feelings for this excellent leader, those who acted like a royal vassal, and those who acted like a tsundere, they were all ready to act so that her renka would be safe. She pointed towards the dark cave and said that then they should proceed to the next floor. After some time, they continued to dive deeper into the dungeon, and he thought that when planning a dive, the most important thing was the party's level and the corresponding level of each floor. Corresponding is the party level required to clear a particular floor. Considering the adventurers' ranks, the Twilight Sword party was level 12. Manticore's hunting grounds, the 23rd floor, corresponded to level 6. Minotaur, the 40th floor, corresponded to level 13. They cleared both floors without any problems. Indeed, it should be noted in the dive report that the entire process took only 2 days. Normally, it would take 10 days. And such an incident would certainly cause a stir. They would set up camp near the oasis on the 47th floor while they settled in. The current floor was 47, and the corresponding level was 15. The monster hunt had been going on for 4 days already. On this floor, they encountered skill monsters that had a human torso and a snake-like lower body. They are cruel, use sharp nails as weapons, and possess incredible physical strength. The protagonist said that monsters living at such depths are capable of destroying an entire squad, so they should be careful. Yuika smiled confidently and said they had nothing to fear. She ordered 6 skeletons to keep these monsters at bay, and they immediately ran forward. They barely stopped the attack of the skill's nails with the help of shields, but the snakes also began to bite their legs. She loudly declared that it was useless, as the poison had no effect on her subordinates. She called the 7th and ordered him to break through their flank. The skeleton immediately listened to her, bounced off the rock, jumped towards the monsters, and struck one of them in the back with his sword, but was unable to pierce the tough skin. However, after his attack, a powerful explosion occurred, which killed the monster. MC watched this from the side in surprise and wondered, was this a gift of influence? Nuku looked up and said loudly that something was coming out of the ceiling. Barry also looked at it and said loudly that it was a huge slime. He also looked at it and said loudly that it was a slime prince, capable of dissolving even metal. Yuika immediately shouted to stay away from this monster. When everyone ran away, he said that close combat wouldn't work. She called Oink from 1 to 4 and said that they should keep their distance and attack with their spears. Mazikan called the Black Princess and said that the skills had broken through. She immediately called Oink from 5 to 8 and said that they should deal with them. Ro looked at this and thought that she was using her monsters with special abilities in mind. With this tactic, the entire party conserves its strength, which is wonderful. He called her and said that there was a loud echo here. If the battle dragged on, other monsters would come towards the sound and throw a carnival here. Note, this is what they call a situation where hordes of monsters gather in one place, organizing a series of prolonged battles. She thought about it and asked which of the gathered monsters would be the most problematic. He said that he thought it was the jelly toads and the underground garrison. Mazikan looked away with a smirk and said that, by the way, something was approaching. Barry heard the sound of approaching monsters and said loudly in disgust that they were jelly toads. These monsters knock down their victims with a stream of liquid that accumulates on their body. Yuika looked at the monsters and asked, "It's like a water cannon, right?" She called Neko and said that she should use the lightning trap spell and paralyze them. The manticore did so, and all the toads were paralyzed. She said with a calm smile that lightning magic works well on water monsters. She called Minoran and said he should kill them in one blow. The Minotaur stepped forward, swung his enormous axe, and struck the monsters with the flat side. He was shocked by what had happened, and she turned away and said it was much more effective than killing them one by one. Nuku called the Black Princess and said that 4 more were approaching. The protagonist became worried about this, called her, and said that the 4 monsters hiding on this floor were most likely a garrison. They were forming squads. There might not be any gaps in their defenses. They were quite formidable opponents. At that moment, a very cold gust of wind blew near them. Barry began to shiver from the cold and asked if it was snow magic. Nuku looked away and said that the orc and the slime prince were frozen. Mazikin laughed when he saw several silhouettes in the darkness and said how lively this carnival was. An underground garrison of lesser demons, equipped with various equipment, abandoned on the lower levels, came to join them. Yuika picked up her sword and said with a smile that they had a mage and also seemed to be skilled with a sword. Barry called the princess and asked what they should do with their skills. She said that she and Nuku should work on them and help the skeletons. They should also be careful of snake venom. She asked the princess with a joyful smile if she would heal her if the monsters bit her. Right? She ran to fight the other monsters, called Neko and Minoran, saying that they should recruit them into their army. After some time, they stopped at an oasis on the 47th floor, and MC said that this carnival gave him goosebumps. He seemed to understand now why they always had such unusual loot. Yuika laughed, agreed, and said that, however, they were only able to get all 4 thanks to him. The appearance of stronger monsters was their goal. That way, they could strengthen their armed forces. She began to eat the soup and said that, by the way, he cooks well. She absolutely loves this soup. He was glad to hear this, and Nuku said that being able to eat salad so deep underground was amazing. He turned to him with a smile and said that, after all, they had moved at a fast pace. He heard the kettle boil and said that the Sarabo tea was ready. He handed the cup of tea to her and thought that, starting with the manticore, the total number of monsters under her command was 50. From the expression on her face, one could tell that she was very tired. A potion would help with this, but it seemed that first she should replenish her strength with delicious food. He began to cut the meat and said that the main course would be smoked meat. It tastes better when sliced thin, but Marie prefers eating it in a sandwich. She said with a surprised expression that she told him this while they were eating together. He said with a smile that, of course, they often do this at home. She remembered the time spent with her, with a happy expression on her face, and blushed with embarrassment. He said that while she was sleeping, his sister said that she had a lot of fun. Would she mind playing with her again? She agreed with a very happy expression on her face, and they continued talking. Barry looked at them from the side and thought, the eternally cool, awe-inspiring, and beautiful princess is capable of making such a face? What was that freak up to? When they finished washing the dishes, Mazikin asked that since the meal was over, it was time to check the things they received. Could he please lay out everything they collected on the ground? Ro agreed, and laid out all the items they received from the monsters on the ground. They all came over to look at it, and Barry was sitting there eating soup. He said that the lower the floor, the more varied the items. Nuku asked with a little surprise, how did he manage to collect all this? He calmly said that he managed to find time between battles. Collecting dropped items and demonic cores, that's his job, after all. He said with a tense look that he was saying it so calmly, but collecting everything alone is quite difficult. The gift of stamina recovery is simply incredible. He calmly asked, did he really think so? Mazikan examined what they got and said that half of it seemed useful. The armor and weapons of the monsters are cursed, so it will be difficult for people who use them. Yuika asked if a dark blacksmith created this. The protagonist said that, by the way, he heard that dark blacksmiths make high-class equipment from ore mined in dungeons. Some are even capable of forging magical items, imbued with gifts and specific effects. Note, a dark smith is a special kind of lesser demon that equips humanoids living in the depths of dungeons. He said that dealing with cursed items is dangerous. They lower one's status and also undermine one's physical and magical strength. That's why all the parties discard such items. She said that it won't bring any benefit on the surface. They heard the demon say that it was simply insulting since they put their souls into it. All the team members became worried when they heard this, and he loudly warned her of the danger behind her. The demon held a dagger to her throat and said that what humans can't use is a premium product for them, monsters. They called out for the princess in worried voices, and the demon said that such weapons are very effective at killing adventurers. Barry loudly said that he should release the princess immediately. They immediately prepared for battle, and she was about to ask something, but stopped. The demon jumped away from her and asked, are you asking him? Then she should listen carefully. He doesn't have a name. Those dark blacksmiths they just mentioned, he's one of them. What a relief. He hasn't had to talk to people in a long time. MC looked at him and thought it was strange. There shouldn't be monsters here that can talk. According to the records, although high-level monsters have knowledge of language, they don't talk. Since monsters are driven only by instinct, there is no point in talking, especially with people, that is, their victims. That's not the only strange thing. The team members ran to the princess and called her. She called Nuku with a worried look and asked what happened to his detection skill. He said that he doesn't know. He doesn't sense demonic energy at all. Mazikan, with a serious expression, asked, "This guy, maybe he doesn't have it?" The demon approached the controlled monsters and said that if you think about it, they were from the top floor. Why did they come down here? She ordered the first and second to grab him immediately after that. The monsters attacked the dark blacksmith, and he easily dodged their attacks and loudly said that it was close. Ro's attention was drawn to the footsteps of this demon, and he watched it closely. He again dodged the monster's attack, and they were surprised when he disappeared. He appeared next to Yuika, stepped on the blade of her sword, and pinned it to the ground. He was surprised by this and thought that he used teleportation. He leaned towards her with a smile and said that, so she was controlling them. Barry, surprised, loudly asked what was wrong with him. He jumped away from her and said that what a murderous aura, how scary. He teleported to him and said that he was the only one who greeted them here. He patted him on the shoulder and asked, since he didn't point a gun at him, it seemed like they could be friends. He turned to him with a smile and said that he was flattered. So he will answer a few questions? He asked with a confused look. So he is looking for answers? A smile appeared on his face and he said that he was quite a curious guy. He liked that. However, unfortunately, he still had to deliver the goods, so he couldn't stay longer. They will sink even lower, right? Then they will definitely have a chance to meet again. They must not get killed and remain rotting corpses. People are so interesting, especially those who died recently. He disappeared and Barry asked the princess if she was okay. Yuika, with a calm expression, said that everything was fine. Nuku approached them and apologized for what happened, and she turned to him and said that this was the first time they encountered a monster without demonic energy. Nothing could be done about it. The protagonist said that even though they now knew it was a dark blacksmith, there was no record of their abilities in the Sherpa Guild. She said that she had never encountered anyone like him in other dungeons. The Tyros dungeons were inhabited by monsters unknown to them. Clearing the dungeon completely was a risky undertaking, a fact, something of a test of their resolve as adventurers. He thought with a slightly tense expression that the level of risk was much higher than they had imagined. She said with a smile that it was quite interesting. Her desire to clear this dungeon only increased. The best thing that had happened to them in these 4 days of monster hunting was this secret passage leading to the lower floors. It seemed they simply had to go down to the 48th floor. He asked in surprise, hadn't they only agreed on the 47th? She turned to him and said that they would amend the contract. Mazikan smiled and said she didn't want to interrupt the dive after what that monster had done to her. MC said no one had ever been to the floor below. Not only were there monsters, but there was no information about this place at all. They needed to return to the surface and replenish their supplies before moving on. That was his advice, as Sherpas. She agreed and asked, she understands that, but so what? How could one of the Twilight Sword Squad not think they had the strength to explore the 48th floor? He looked confused, thinking that when she said that, they worked well as a team. And he, the legendary sage, didn't use his offensive magic at all. Mazikan yawned loudly and said that after such a heavy meal, he felt sleepy. He sighed and thought that in other words, they still had an ace up their sleeve. He took a deep breath and said that it was unfair, since he had nothing to say in response. She apologized with a small smile and said that she felt that he would listen to her decision. He was confused by this and asked, what does that mean? So this is how she deals with everything? She laughed and asked with a smile, does he really think so? Barry, angry at their conversation, jumped between them and loudly said that the Twilight Sword could deal with anyone at any time without his help. He was confused by this and said that from the looks of it, he had no choice anyway, so he would just listen to her. Yuika, smiling, said that that was great. Then they should set off into the unknown. Later, they descended to the 48th floor of the dungeon, and he thought that the dive into an uncharted place was beginning. He said that the glowing moss was very high and a lot of mana was concentrated here. Also, this surface wouldn't be the best support. Barry, with a haughty smirk, said that by the way, now that they were here, it wasn't much use. He was incapable of anything now, was he? Ro agreed and thought that upon arriving on a floor where no human had yet set foot, it was common for them Sherpas to rely on the experience and instincts of adventurers. The first thing they needed to do was draw a map. They also needed to make notes about the surroundings. They went further, and Barry called the princess and said that they could get to the oasis here. They came to it. Nuku said that he had spotted a monster ahead. This caught her attention, and she asked if it was above the oasis. She looked there, and surprised, said that she actually saw something. It was a huge vine cannon. Even if there was something here, She was sure it was quite boring. They hadn't encountered any monsters on the way here. She was sure someone was still excited about this place. Could she tell me if they'd found an oasis that meant they'd reached their goal? Yuika agreed and said that they should take a little rest and then return to the surface. The protagonist looked at this with an interested expression, and Barry, looking inspired, said that they should cut down this plant then. The night seed that this monster dropped could be sold for a very good price, since it was used for restorative medicine. He continued to look at it and thought that the vine cannon was an ordinary plant monster. It was worth taking a closer look. It attacked adventurers by throwing seeds from its tube-shaped pods at them, and even beginners could easily defeat this monster. What was the plant that usually lived on the upper floors doing here? The leaves and tubes are a little different. He turned to them and said loudly that this is not a vine cannon, they should not touch it. However, at the moment he said this, Barry had already cut off a piece of this monster's vine. Immediately after that, a powerful explosion occurred. A bunch of thorns flew from the plant, which hit him, and he thought that his strength was leaving him. These thorns were poisoned. He called out to the others in a tired voice and asked if they were okay. He saw how all the team members were hurt and couldn't move. He fell to the ground and thought that he was cold. He couldn't move his arms and legs either. His body seemed to be dissolving. Is this death? Yuika walked up to him, used the dark dewdrop spell, called him, and asked him to wake up. He heard her voice, came to his senses, stood up abruptly, and called out loudly for her. She said that she used a healing spell, so the poison should disappear from his system. It seemed she had removed all the thorns that were in it, but he should check again, just in case. He thanked her, asked her to wait, and asked if she had really pulled it out with her hands. She said that he didn't have to worry about it. He put the backpack on the ground and said that, however, she was bleeding, he would give her a healing potion. She said that now was not the time for that. It seemed that the poison was spreading quickly throughout the body. Therefore, first, they needed to save the others. He ran after her, offered his help, looked around and wondered. The oasis had evaporated. How big was the explosion? If it weren't for the effect of the silver oil coating, they would have definitely died. They approached Barry, examined her, and he thought that it was terrible. She managed to protect her eyes, but the rest of her face and body. He called her and said that she should use tweezers. She took it from him, agreed, and together they began to pull out the needles. When they were done, she used magic on her, causing her to quickly regain consciousness. Yuika called her and asked if she was okay. She agreed, and he handed her a vial of potion and asked her to drink it. Mazikan flew up to them, called the Black Princess, and said that she should not forget about him. If he died here, the world would not survive this loss. They were surprised that only one needle hit him, and he said that it was good that he had the gift of strengthening on his cloak. Later, they also healed Nuka, and she, looking tired, said that only monsters remained. MC approached her and gave her a portion of the potion, for which she thanked him and said that she would order them to guard them. Mazikan flew up to Barry, gently hit her on the head with his staff, and said that now is the best time to apologize. She called him an annoying old man, but still obeyed and asked for forgiveness. Nuku approached them and said that Ro was the only one who sensed danger, so she was not to blame. Healing magic is something few people can do, so if it worked for the Black Princess, he would have. He said that in any case, for a normal plant monster, this thing had too much power and poison. It could have been the floor boss. He said that they usually assume that plants are weak, but now they will have to change their minds. They all immediately turned around when Yuika fell to the ground and went to her. Barry lifted her up and asked in a worried tone what was wrong with her. He sat down next to her and said that it must be because of the poison. She was surprised by this and loudly declared that it was impossible. The princess has a level 3 resistance. She is resistant not only to burns and stuns, but to any impact in general. He thought it was true that at level 3, resilience could resist almost anything, but it still wouldn't nullify it 100%. He asked, so she hadn't used the dark dewdrops on herself? Nuku, with a tense expression, said that it didn't work on a magic caster. He was surprised by this, noticed that her breathing was getting weaker, and said that if this continued, her life would be in danger. Does anyone have any medicine or potions for poisons? He hadn't stocked up on any before leaving. Barry said that for them, the Twilight Sword medicine was unnecessary. They didn't have any. Since there were so many poisons, they filled the empty space with potions to restore mana. He thought that it turned out that their plan was entirely based on Yuika's physical condition. He noticed that she tried to say something, leaned closer and asked what was wrong. She writhed in pain, and he thought her speech had become incoherent. He said that she would soon start delirious. Mazikan remembered something and said in a worried tone that this was bad. He stopped using levitation and began to walk away from them. The protagonist looked at him and noticed that he was going to where the monsters were guarding them. He approached these monsters and, with a serious expression on his face, used the Ray of Banishing Light spell. He believed that it should work. finished casting the spell and blew up all these monsters. He was surprised by this and asked why it was necessary to get rid of them. Nuku said that if the Black Princess lost consciousness, the effect of the Phantom Needle would wear off. He immediately understood him and thought that then they would be surrounded by all these monsters. Even such an overwhelming gift has a weakness. He said that he would heal her, but they should go get the backpack. He laid out his tools and various potions nearby and said that he wasn't sure if it would help, but he would try mixing some medicines. They should lay her horizontally on the ground. He put something in a mortar and said that they should start with a stimulant. He brought his finger with the medicine to her face and said that it would be great if a strong smell would wake her up. Yuika started making sounds from the smell, but she was still unconscious. MC looked at her and thought that her breathing was still weak. He needed a cardiotonic. He prepared it and thought that he should mix it with water and give it to her. He said that just in case, he needed to ask something. Are any of them in a relationship with her? Barry asked with a confused look. What is he talking about? He took the medicine in his mouth and asked, does that mean no? She looked surprised by this, and he leaned over to Yuika and poured the medicine into her mouth with a kiss. She swallowed the medicine, and Nuku noticed her coming towards them and told her to stop. She moved him away, took the medicine in her mouth, and said that she would do it. He asked her to wait and said that there was a trick to get an unconscious person to drink medicine. She didn't listen to him, which caused her to start coughing loudly. He became worried about this, called Ro, and said that it didn't work this time. Will everything be okay with the Black Princess? He thought with a worried look that the poison had weakened her heart, so a cardiotonic should help, but he no longer had it. That's right. He has a candy made from a mental strength potion, which is designed to strengthen the mind. This should help her stay conscious. He crushed the candy into powder with a stone, poured it into her mouth, and also poured some water. He poured the medicine into her mouth, and Nuku called him with a worried look and asked if he was sure about this medicine. He looked at him, began to take off his outerwear and said that to be honest, he didn't know. This is not enough for proper treatment. They need to return to the surface as soon as possible and find someone who can heal her with magic. Does anyone know spells that strengthen endurance? He wrapped her in his clothes, and Mazikan said that he could use a couple of spells at a basic level. The protagonist said that then he should cast it on her from time to time. Otherwise, when the effect of the medicine wears off, it will be the end for her. He picked up Yuika in his arms, and Barry held out her arms and said that she could carry the princess. He looked at her and said that even though they destroyed most of the monsters on the way here, he was sure that there were still many left. She and Sir Nuku must be prepared for anything. She agreed with this, after which they all ran together to the exit of the dungeon. He ran next to her and asked if he was sure he could manage without a map. He said that he remembered the road they were taking, so it was no problem. He told them the direction, and he asked him to wait and said that he sensed 2 monsters. Wait, they are right above them and their number is growing. Those are blood cockroaches. Note, these monsters suck the blood of a still living victim and lay their eggs there. They are incredibly fast. He called her and asked if she could use the sail spell on them. She agreed, and he said loudly that then they should get rid of these monsters as quickly as possible. He thought that they needed to get to the surface as quickly as possible. They continued running along the 48th floor. He looked at Yuika's face and thought that saving the lives of others and also enduring the unbearable pain from the poison, she had incredible concentration and strength. He hugged her tighter and thought that he wouldn't let her die in a place like this. Sometime later, on the 41st floor of the dungeon, they took a short break, and MC said that he had given her a dose of sedatives. Because of this, she would be one step away from death, but it would prevent the poison from spreading further through her body. They were very worried about this. Mazikan calmly said that this slows down the blood and begins to clot. After all, it was originally used as a poison. Does he want to use this effect to block another poison? He agreed and said that all they could do was wait. Yuika opened her eyes. They all noticed this and immediately called out to the princess, and she very quietly asked where they were. Barry and Nuku didn't understand what she had just said, and he said that they were on the 41st floor now. They were going to get to the surface to take her to a healer. He gave her some medicine, but she would need to take more later. It must be difficult, but she had to try to breathe. It all depended on her will to live. She tried to say something incoherently, and he asked with a small smile, does she mean to say that when it comes to willpower, she's the best here? As expected of her, she should keep it up. He started to get to his feet, and Nuku called out to him and said that although he had the gift of restoring stamina, carrying all of this on himself was too much. Wouldn't it be better to throw away the backpack so they could move faster? He picked her up and said that he had planned to do that when his legs got tired, but that was still a long way off, so it was fine. She called his name, and he turned to her and asked, what's wrong? She slowly tried to ask something in a very tired voice, and he realized that she asked why he was helping her so much. Rose said that there's no special reason for it. Was it even necessary to help the person he liked? She was surprised by this, and her face turned red. Barry was indignant at this, grabbed his shoulder and loudly asked, how dare he say such a thing at such a time? He asked in a calm tone if she could be so angry. It meant she still had a lot of strength left, right? She was confused by this, and he turned turned and asked Nuka how he was feeling. He said that he was fine. He said that they should drink a stamina replenishing potion if necessary, and now they were moving on. Sometime later, Yuika came to her senses in the clinic and asked loudly in surprise, "What the hell is this?" The doctor who used his magic on her was surprised by this, and loudly said that this is a clinic. Is there something she doesn't like about his healing magic? She calmed down a little, and he went to the exit and said in a displeased tone that, since she could move, they should leave here. Mazakan sat next to her, apologized to him for the intrusion, and thanked him for his help. She thought she felt like she was in the depths of the dungeon just a minute ago. She barely remembered anything. She must have passed out on the way here. He called the Black Princess and said it was good that she was okay. She agreed and asked him to tell her what happened. He smiled and said that she was so impatient, even when she almost died. Under the guidance of this young Sherpa, they were able to return to the surface in just one day. Of course, they tried their best to avoid fighting, but could she imagine them running from the 48th floor and not running into anyone? Only the young Sherpa looked unperturbed in this situation. She asked where Barry and Nuku were now. He said that they got separated while taking a shortcut. However, there was only one exit, so she shouldn't worry about them. He asked her for forgiveness and said that his daughter's carelessness had almost ruined her. She looked around the room with a calm expression and said that everything was fine. He shouldn't worry. Besides, she had something to blame too. This wouldn't have happened if she had been more careful. She remembered how the protagonist had helped them in the dungeon and said that he had helped them a lot. He agreed with a smile and said that he had especially helped her. This young man was passing the medicine mouth to mouth. She was embarrassed by this, and he said that Barry had even counted how many times he had done this. 7 times. He went to the exit and said that he would go pay the bill. Gold for just one spell. That was robbery. She wondered with a confused look. Did this mean that she had kissed him? By the way, she could still taste the medicine. She was sure that it was very bitter. Who would have thought that her first kiss would taste like medicine? At that moment, he came to the clinic, called the doctor, and asked how Yuika was feeling. He came to her room, started talking to her, but she didn't pay attention and thought that she was living in a fantasy like the other girls. But everything was definitely not as she imagined. Although he did it to save her life, so she should be grateful. However, then he said that there was no special reason. She's not sure what exactly he was trying to say. How can she look him in the eyes now? He went to her bed, called her again. She was very embarrassed when she noticed him and asked loudly how long he had been sitting there. He calmly said that he just arrived. He left all the things they got during the dive at the Adventurers Guild, and Nuku and Barry are resting at the inn. She asked with an embarrassed look, "By the way, can she ask you something?" He agreed, and she hesitantly said that his words were there in the dungeon. She was interrupted by the doctor, who loudly called MC's name. He said in a displeased voice that he couldn't enjoy alcohol while they were here. He had to get them out of here already. He turned to him and said that he didn't think drinking during work hours was the best idea. The doctor asked him to shut up, and he turned to her, apologized for it, and said that he always behaved like this. She can move, right? She agreed, and he said that it was time for them to go then. Outside, he thanked the doctor, but he only closed the door in front of them. They walked down the street and he said that he would be back as soon as he took them to the tavern. His sister was still with relatives, so they needed to pick her up. Yuika said that was right, they should show Mari first, so she could calm down. He agreed, and a man approached them and said that he recognized that noble appearance. Could it really be him, the Lord Sage? Mazikan turned to him and said that he was. She turned and asked who he was. Ro called him Mayor Baramon, and he said with a happy expression that he was flattered when they came to that dinner party. He didn't understand what he was talking about, but she remembered that she had gone with him and Mari to the restaurant that day. He asked if they weren't in a dive or if he had interrupted something. She denied it and said that 3 short dives were originally planned, but they had only completed the first one. Their goal remained the same, to completely clear the Tyros dungeon. They had currently reached the 48th floor, previously unexplored. The report would be filed later. He didn't recognize her, and Mazakan said that she was the leader of the Twilight Sword. Baramon was surprised by this and asked, "So she's the Black Princess? She broke the record in such a short time. It's incredible." He asks to be allowed to invite her to another one. He didn't have time to finish because Yuika said that she appreciated his kindness. Her mission is to clear every dungeon in this world. He looked at the protagonist and asked, "By the way, who is he?" He introduced himself and said that he was from the Sherpa Guild. He remembered him and said that he had heard that he was very talented for such a young age. He thanked him and said that, however, he was not worthy of such admiration. He said with a cheerful look that the famous heroes of the East and the best Sherpa in the city, it was simply fantastic. She called the mayor and said that they needed to rest, so she asked to be excused. Mazakan, with a wide smile, said that he was not against a dinner party. She called him, and the 3 of them left. Baramon looked at them and said that in just a couple of days of the first dive, they had explored a new floor. Later, he came to the Sherpa Guild and greeted Jima. She responded in kind, called him Little Barry and asked, she was just wondering who had come at such an hour. He sighed with a smile and said that she should stop treating him like a child. After all, he was over 40 years old. She said that his name was too hard to pronounce, What did he want? He was silent for a few seconds, and she said that he shouldn't worry. Everyone had already gone home and she was here alone. He said MC's name and said that he was currently working with a squad called the Heroes of the East. He heard that they were exploring dungeons at an abnormal speed. They had already reached the 48th floor. She agreed and said with a smile that they were currently busy updating the maps at the guild. She flinched when he said that. However, what he really wanted to talk to her about. From now on, she should reconsider her attitude towards him. She was about to ask something, but he beat her to it and said that, after the death of his parents, the only family for him was his younger sister. She asked how he knew this. He said that Gunji told him this at the bar. He speaks as if Marie were his sister. She was unhappy about this, clenched her hand into a fist and asked, "So what?" He said it was nothing. He wasn't trying to force her to do anything about it. The Twilight Sword was still a very important guest for them. However, he did have one request. He asked to protect his sister. How much could he tarnish his Sherpa pride? The next morning after the dive, Yuika knocked on Ro's door, called his name, and asked if he was home. Mari heard her and, with a happy expression, said it was her sister's voice. He asked her to open the door with a small smile, and she did so immediately and said, "Welcome." She greeted her with a smile and asked how she was doing. She noticed a human silhouette next to her, looked out from behind the door, and saw Nuka, who emanated a threatening aura, which frightened her greatly. She apologized for this and said that she shouldn't worry. He was her friend. She was caught in fear, introduced herself, and told him her age. He stood silently, but she called him, and he apologized. He bowed low, introduced himself, stated his age, and said that he was grateful for their acceptance. She was a little surprised by this, and asked what he was doing. It was not necessary to state his age. The protagonist came to them, wiped his hands with a towel, and asked what brought them here. She said that she apologized for disturbing him so early in the morning. She wanted to express her gratitude to him, and he wanted to talk to him about the dive report. He allowed them to enter, and after a while, Nuku came out of his house and said that he was counting on him. He called the lady and said that she should return before sunset, otherwise Barry would get angry again. She agreed, and when he left, she turned around, apologized, and said that she did not know that they were going on a picnic and had dropped in so suddenly. He said in a calm voice that she did not need to worry, everything was fine. The adventurer's report and the Sherpa's report, if it doesn't match, they'll be called in later to sort out the details. It's good they were able to discuss everything before submitting their reports. She was a little surprised by his reaction and said with a slightly displeased expression that Nuku was always very strict about this matter. She couldn't even remember how many times she'd heard him say it. It really was important. Mari approached her and, in a slightly nervous voice, asked her sister if she wanted to join them on the picnic. Yuiko was surprised by this and asked if she really could. MC agreed with a friendly smile and said that she really wanted her to go with them. She thanked them for the invitation and agreed to go with them. Later, they came to a forest outside the city. She walked ahead, called her sister, and said that they were picking goji berries here. She urged her to hurry, and she called her by name and said that she should go slower because she could fall if she ran so fast. Mari stopped next to a bush, started picking berries, and said that they could make incredibly delicious jam. She said with a slight surprise that she knew a lot. She agreed with a joyful smile and said that she knew a lot more. For example, any rabbit can be sold for a good price. However, if you put those with good meat and those with bad meat together, you can't expect great sales. Also, at the store opposite their house, the vegetables are always rotten. Her brother taught her all this. Yuika turned to him with a very displeased expression and said that, so that's how it is. He started to worry about it and thought that he just wanted to teach her a few tricks that would be useful in life. Had he really overdone it? After some time, the girls fell asleep on the blanket, and he looked at them with a small smile and thought that apparently the two of them calmed down. He heard from Sir Mazaken that she cannot sleep while the Phantom Needle is working. This means that during their dive, she did not sleep for a minute, and they spent almost a week in the cave. That's why their team avoids long dives. Then, why did he choose to say those particular words? Maybe the thought of how she was suffering from the poison and that she had to rely only on her own willpower made him feel that she needed a reason to hold on. One could explain it that way, but if that was really the case, then a lot of other words could be found, right? For example, something about diving. He looked at her face and thought that she was very beautiful. He also likes her courage when she faces difficulties and the speed with which she resolves them. Also, the expression on her face when she sees Marie, she seems to like children. Also, that strength of will he saw in the dungeon. It seems he now understands that those words escaped his lips precisely because his heart told him so. Right, now he even feels somehow better. Ro called her by name and said that his words back then, in the dungeon, weren't a lie. He closed his eyes and thought that everything was clear to him now. Suddenly, Yuika woke up, grabbed him by the collar, and with an embarrassed expression asked Is he telling the truth now? He was confused by this. Agreed, and she thought that this meant it really was a confession. She asked with confusion, so, does that mean they're a couple now? She may have never been in a relationship, but she has some knowledge of how it works, so he can rely on her. He thought with a confused smile that he had a feeling that soon their life would change beyond recognition. She said that in the imperial capital, where she used to live, she had a servant named Tai. She once told her to remember these words well. If she ever finds a person dear to her heart, they should first get to know each other better. That's why she asks to let her tell her story. For starters, the largest building in this city is the Temple of Galactica, Mother Earth, right? He agreed, and she said that the headquarters of the Order of Galactica is a temple located in the capital. In this place, she grew up as a spiritual priestess of this goddess. He asked, is that why she is constantly called the Black Princess? She agreed and said that black hair and eyes are rare in humans. When the head priest found her at the goddess's statue, he received a revelation. The goddess said that this child was gifted with her blessing, and they must raise her in purity and innocence. Thanks to her, evil will disappear from this land, returning harmony to this place. Eureka said that the core of the dungeon, which is located in the deepest part, has a limit. When it reaches its limit, it will explode. This explosion will defile the surface with incredibly concentrated magical essence, and this will be the end. Other continents have already met their end, becoming nothing but lifeless land. To save this land, they must get rid of the core before it reaches its limit. To help people in this mission, the goddess bestowed upon them power. The protagonist listened carefully and thought that these must be the gifts. She recalled her past and said that because of her status as a priestess, people hoped that she would become a great adventurer, so she had to accept her fate. The core of the largest dungeon in the imperial capital, called the Endless Dungeon, had almost reached its limit. After such a revelation, she simply couldn't sit idle. Not only her hometown, but the entire Earth would be destroyed. People only live once, so being the one to save this world isn't so bad. He was very surprised by this, and she said that if she reached the core of the dungeon in this city, she would be able to level up. This meant that it would be another step towards preventing the end. After meeting him and Marie, she had even more reasons to save this world. He thought with surprise on his face that who could have known that the person who loved him was the hero destined to save the world? Marie would have been very surprised if she heard about this. He said with a smile that he would support her in everything, as an ordinary person and as a Sherpa. She thanked him with a joyful smile and said that it was reassuring. A few days later, the Sherpa Guild was holding a meeting, and MC thought the shortcut found on the 48th floor, along with the discovery of a new oasis, was breaking news that quickly spread among the city's residents. One of the workers happily called the foreman and said that the Sherpa map had been updated. Gunji looked at him and said he had done an excellent job. From now on, expedition requests from high-class adventurers would definitely increase several times over. They should keep that in mind. Ro sat next to him and thought that all those herbs and ore found on the unprotected floor could bring in a huge profit. He was confident that Eureka and her squad would be able to reach the bottom floor and get rid of the core. If left unchecked, the city would surely be destroyed in the future. Disgruntled Sherpas approached him and asked when he had managed to secure such a large contract with someone like Twilight Sword. He hadn't even known they were in their city. He wished he could be a candidate for such a job. Jima came to them and said they had many special requirements for a Sherpa, and he turned out to be the only one who met all the criteria. They called the master and said that he could at least tell them what date they planned the dive for. He really wanted to see them. He heard that their leader was very beautiful. They also had a legendary sage on their team. Gunji said that he knew they would behave like this, so they asked him not to talk about it. She said that their leader doesn't like to make noise, which is why they came incognito. However, their last dive did cause a stir. By the way, is he sure? Is it true that the heroes of the East will be able to clear their dungeon? The protagonist agreed and said that, compared to all the teams he had worked with, he believed that they could handle it. She looked down thoughtfully and said that she understood him. She turned around and the Sherpas said that the Twilight Sword was still very cool. They should drink to them. He looked at her and felt anxiety arising from the sudden silence, or rather, a premonition of something. That's what he felt at that moment. Later, he came to Morel's house, knocked, and said hello. She opened the door, looked at him, and asked if he was late. He handed her something in a bag, apologized, and said that work had dragged on. It was for her. He asked to share it with everyone. She took it and asked if these were the same sweets. Right? It wasn't that she didn't like it, she was just worried about her dental health. They entered the house, and she said that they should hurry and take their seats. She asked to be excused. They had already started eating. He thanked her and greeted Dasi, who was sitting at the table and eating. He looked at him and asked if it was true that he had been hired by the heroes of the East. They all sat down at the table and started eating, and MC agreed and said that he was very grateful for it. At the moment, this is the highest paying job he has ever had. He said with surprise that it was amazing. He thought that this was their monthly dinner, strengthening their blood ties. At least, they all pretended that way. In reality, It was a monthly report on his finances. Dasi said that he must have saved up a lot of money. He said with a smile that he had enough of gold coins, I think a couple dozen or so. Their children thanked them for the food and ran to their room. He started counting on his fingers, and Murao asked what he was doing. He should finish eating quickly. He sighed and said that he was just thinking about how well he was doing for his age. He said with a smile that he could only work in peace because they took care of his sister. He laughed and said that he didn't need any thanks. There are no orphanages in this city, so as long as they are a family, it is their responsibility to look after the children, right? Ro apologized and thought that every time he took Mari, he gave them compensation in the amount of 2 silver coins, but they never talk about it. As usual, the bread is hard and the soup is watery. However, he can't refuse it no matter what they are. It's because they promised to take Mari if he dies in the dungeon. As a condition, they will take everything he had. However, to be honest, he left half of his money with Gunji to give to his sister when she grows up. Even though he is strange, he can be trusted. He called her, pointed a finger at his face, and said that she has a crumb stuck here. She removed it and then they finished eating. He picked her up and said that she fell asleep, so he will go home. They said goodbye, and outside he said that it seemed like all they saw when they looked at him was a big bag of money. He apologized to her and said that so many problems fell on her when he was working. She was sleeping and called out to her brother with a smile, which made him smile, and he found it cute. Later, a huge crowd of different people gathered at the Adventurers Guild. The Adventurers Guild secretary, Sura, said that everyone who wanted to receive a report on the Twilight Sword's dive must submit completed forms before they could begin. Many adventurers approached her and began handing over their forms. The Sherpa Guild secretary, Anne, who had come to help with the work, brought a large stack of forms, and she thanked her for it. One of the adventurers, with a joyful smile, handed over his form and accidentally knocked over the forms she had brought. Sura became extremely angry about this, slammed her hands on the table and loudly declared that they must listen carefully. She forbade them to move forward. Everyone must remain in line and wait their turn. Anyone who fails to handle this trivial matter will be permanently blacklisted. All the adventurers were frightened by her, lined up, and loudly agreed. She said, great, they can if they want. She sat down in her place with a displeased expression, called her over, and said that they must deal with these documents immediately. She looked at her with admiration and agreed. The protagonist walked inside, surprised by the crowd of people he saw, and thought he came to say hello to Yuika, but it seemed he couldn't even find her here. He went to the counter, called Anne, and told her that she was working so hard. She called him with tears in her eyes and said that they had too much work here. Sura angrily called him and asked if he had come to apply too. He was confused by this and said that he just came to meet someone. The leader of the Devil's Wheel adventure party, Sag, came to him and said that he seemed to be doing well. He put his hand on his shoulder and asked, he was a guide for the heroes of the East, right? He shouldn't get arrogant just because important people hired him. After all, he was just an ordinary baggage porter. His team members approached them, agreed with this, and he said with a smile that now he must tell them everything. What gifts does their group have, and how do they fight? The secretaries looked at them with worried looks, and the MC called him and asked if he forgot all the rules because he was stuck in the middle ranks. He would never divulge such personal information, especially to someone who can't keep his mouth shut. He got angry because of this, grabbed him by the collar, loudly called him an idiot and asked what he just said. Sura loudly called him and said that he should stop. At that moment, Yuika came down from the second floor, saw the adventurers gathered and wondered what was wrong with everyone. She couldn't pass because of the crowd, and the people standing in front of her said that he was betting on Sag. Then he would bet on Ro. Her attention was immediately caught by the fact that they called his name, and after that, the people around them started egging them on to fight. She became very angry about this, and started emitting a strong aura that frightened everyone around her, and said in a serious voice that they should all get out of her way. She walked further, and saw an adventurer she didn't know holding him by the collar and raising his fist. She came closer, and he became worried because of how threatening she was. Sag tensed up because of this, and asked what she wanted. She said with a very serious expression that he should get his dirty hands off her darling. He was surprised because of what she just called him, and she said loudly that he should do it now. Because of this, he became very scared, fell to the ground, and started crawling away from her. She looked at him with a frighteningly serious expression on her face, and the protagonist called her and said that she can calm down. He is okay. The adventurers heard her name and asked loudly in surprise, is that the leader of Team Twilight Sword? Anne looked at her with admiration and said that it was much better that way. He asked, by the way, did she just call him darling? She agreed and said with embarrassment that they were a couple, after all. The secretaries were very surprised by this. Yuika approached them and said that she apologized for the noise. They were confused by this and said that everything was fine. She said with a smile that she still had things to do, so she apologized. Nuku will deal with the rest. He is serious and insightful. There shouldn't be any problems. Anne was very nervous about talking to her, and with a blushing face said that it was good. He came closer, called her, and said that these two were his good acquaintances. Sura bowed to her and said that she apologized for not introducing herself right away. She gave her name and said that she was the secretary of this guild. She stood next to her, very nervous, introduced herself and said that she was sent from the Sherpa guild to help. Bika also introduced herself and said that she was grateful to them for taking care of her darling. She asked with surprise how long the two of them had been dating. She said with a joyful smile that it had been a few days, but the confession had been even earlier. He confessed to her first. Anne, looking happy, said that it was so romantic. The adventurers were stunned by this, and she, with an even happier smile, said that it had happened twice. She was even more surprised by this and said that he was so persistent. She was about to ask something else, and Sura called her and said that she had gotten carried away. She turned to her and asked admiringly, however, "Isn't it lovely?" Yuina, looking happy, laughed and said that it was exactly like that. "How about meeting later and having lunch together?" Anne immediately agreed and said that she would be happy to go. MC said that he was sorry for causing so much trouble when they had so much work. Sura said that it was okay, there was no need to apologize. He called her and asked if they should go already. She agreed. They went to the exit. He waved his hand to the secretaries and said that they would see each other later. Anne, with a very happy expression on her face, turned around and said that she invited them to eat together. They should ask them about everything properly. She, looking a little confused, agreed and said that now they should get back to work. When they went outside, he called her by name. She called him darling and asked what was wrong. He asked if she was sure she should call him that. She agreed and said that Tae called her husband that, so she called him that too. He thought about it. She was talking about her maid, right? Yuika said with a smile that she was just over 40 years old and had raised many children. However, she and her husband still loved each other like newlyweds. She taught her everything about love. For example, lovers should always trust each other no matter what happens, and also devote themselves entirely to the relationship. If they are close, then their love will be endless, so she believed. To be honest, she hadn't been listening that closely to her endless talk about love. Still, she didn't think she would ever have a loved one. Now she regretted not listening properly. He thought with a slightly nervous look that he was very glad that they didn't use the word darling in relation to each other. He didn't think he could call her that in front of everyone. It seemed she grew up in a rather abnormal environment. She grew up logical and calm, but when it came to the basics, she had practically no knowledge and experience. She called him darling again and said that now they should strengthen their bond. She extended her hand to him, and he wondered, did she want to hold hands? That's what he thought, but things turned out differently. Ro called her name and asked what she was doing. Yuika turned to him and said that it was called clasping hands. He laughed, and she asked if something was wrong. He said that everything was fine. He just thought that it was very much her style. He thought that it seemed that every couple was unique in their own way. However, despite her embarrassment and mistakes in the most ordinary things, the most important thing was that they felt happiness and pleasure in it. He asked if maybe it would be easier to walk if they matched each other's steps. She agreed to try. Barry came out of the restaurant next to them, called Pops, and said that they would see each other later. He had the best meat. He happily called her young lady and said that of course it was so. She should come again. She noticed them walking together and asked why they were together. She noticed that they were holding hands and screamed loudly in confusion. She wondered why they were holding hands so strangely and walking in sync. She ran towards them, called the princess, asked her to wait, but at that moment a cat jumped on her and looked at the meat she was holding. She apologized to the cat and said that she was in a hurry. She turned to them and did not notice where they went. She was very upset about this, and they continued walking, and Yuika asked if this was the same clinic. The protagonist knocked on the door, agreed, and said that he just needed to ask the doctor something. It wouldn't take long. He went inside, called Dr. Canope, identified himself, and said that he was coming in. He walked further, saw that he was sleeping next to a pile of empty alcohol bottles, and said that he knew he was sleeping. He tried to wake him up, and she looked a little worried, thinking about how there were so many bottles of alcohol here. He was also worried about it and said that it was useless. He was passed out. He called her and asked. It was a little awkward to ask her about this, but could she use the dark race drop spell on him? She agreed and said that it was no problem for her. She used magic. He came to his senses and asked with surprise if he didn't have a headache because the alcohol was so good. MC asked if he made the medicine he asked him for. Canope denied it, and he handed him a bottle of alcohol and said that then he asks at least to give him the prescription. He said that he should wait a second, he will write it now. He wrote him a recipe for an antidote and said that if he could sell it, he should remember to bring him more alcohol. He agreed and thanked him for it. They left the clinic and she asked what kind of antidote it was. He said it was an antidote for the poison the floor boss had given them last time. He thought that at the moment this monster was registered in the dungeon guide under the name of the bomb vine. He said that he gave the doctor a couple of thorns that he managed to save. He has the gift of analysis, so if he has the source of the poison, making an antidote is no problem for him. She, with a slightly dissatisfied expression, said that she would never have thought that he would have such an amazing gift. He said with a smile that he looks a little scary and is constantly angry. He inflates prices incredibly and also drinks on the job. However, he is good at magic and everything he knows about pharmacology, he learned from him. He can be trusted. After he makes a few copies of the antidote, he plans to sell it at the Adventurers Guild. So he was thinking about this when he saved her? Ro asked if it bothered her. She said with a slightly surprised expression that it wasn't at all. She was impressed. As expected of her darling, they can take the antidotes with them on their next dive. That's wonderful, isn't it? He asked if they would go home after buying groceries. Okay? She agreed, then noticed a store, called him over, and suggested they go in there. He looked toward the store and asked if she wanted to go to the bookstore. She agreed and said that she wanted to buy something. Later, they arrived home and were met by Marie, who said, "Welcome back." They approached her, and Yuika took out a picture book and said that she had a gift for her. She took it with a very happy expression and thanked her for it. She said with a contented smile that she was glad that she liked it. They entered the house, and he said that he would go cook dinner. Could she read with her? She happily agreed and said that he could rely on her. They sat down to read, and when he finished cooking, they went to eat. After some time, Marie, looking tired, rubbed her eyes, called her sister, and suggested that they go to bed together. He called her and said that it was time for her to go home. Yuika hugged her and told Darling that she did not want to leave. He was confused by this and said that she could not stay here. Trust between adventurers and sherpas is a very important component. If she stayed with him again, the others would stop trusting him. She did not lose hope of staying at their house and asked if she could at least stay here until she fell asleep. He apologized and said that, however, she was already asleep. She carried her to bed and wished her good night. They went outside, he offered to walk her home, and she said that it was not worth it. He should not leave Mari alone. He agreed and said that then they would see each other tomorrow. She turned to him with a slightly displeased expression on her face, and he asked, "Is something wrong?" She said that Tai said that whether it is morning or night, when lovers are separated, they say goodbye to each other properly. He looked up and thought, does this mean his words are not enough? What is needed then? The protagonist had an idea. He came closer and embarrassedly asked if she could close her eyes. She did so with a very embarrassed expression on her face, and he put his hands on her shoulders and thought that she had also been looking at him for too long. He kissed her and wished good night. A few days later, they began their second dive into the dungeon and reached the 32nd floor. Barry pointed at him and said she'd seen it all. They were walking strangely, holding hands, in the very center of the city. She'd never believe it was a date, she protested. Nuku called the Black Princess and said that if she was in a relationship, it could cause problems. What would the temple master say if he found out about this? Yuika, with a confident smile, asked to hear her out and asked, "Lovers are people for whom the only thing that matters is whether the feelings are mutual, right?" She and her darling had already been through this, so they were definitely lovers. They were shocked by this, and she said loudly that there were bad rumors circulating about this guy. However, she heard about it from the owner of the liquor store. They remember their requirements for sherpas, right? They must be experienced and outstanding, and this guy really is a good guide. However, the problem is their second requirement. Their sherpa must be at least level 5. This guy was a mid-ranked adventurer, level 7, 4 years ago. However, they descended to the 14th floor via a shortcut known only to mid- and high-ranked sherpas. But he deliberately led them to the 13th floor, reserved for beginners. There they defeated every monster they could find, and he took the experience and loot that dropped from that floor for himself. This is what beginner adventurers usually do. Because he did this constantly, he was nicknamed the Floor Eater. Yuika turned to him and asked if he had a reason for doing this, right? He agreed, and said that was exactly it. She calmly said that there was nothing they could do then. Nuku called her and told her that she should think about her situation. She is a symbol of Galactica's trust. All adventurers aspire to be like her. If rumors spread that she was dating someone, it would raise people's doubts. MC listened to him and thought that, according to him, someone once claimed to be her lover, resulting in a lot of gossip articles. This caused a great stir, not only among her fans, but also among the upper echelons of the church, guilds, and young ladies of Blue Bloods. It got to the point that members of the Twilight Swords Squad were forbidden to go out in public. She turned to him and indignantly told Darling that those articles were complete fiction. He was the first person she was dating. Nuku grabbed his head and said that that was not the problem now. He was asking just in case, but was there a chance that they would break up? Yuika decisively refused, and he said that in that case, he wanted to ask her to promise 3 things. First, she must not do anything in front of other people, including this Darling. Secondly, she shouldn't go on dates with him or sleep with him without his permission. Thirdly, when they're in the dungeon, they should stick to the usual relationship of an adventurer and a sherpa. She wanted to object, but he called her over with a serious expression and said that he didn't know if Tai had told her about this, but it was common for lovers to go on dates. It should be done secretly. She said with a little embarrassment that there were people everywhere in this city, and besides, Darling had a sister at home, so where were they supposed to flirt? He and Barry grabbed their heads, and she said loudly that they didn't care. Mazikin laughed and said that young love was so beautiful. His stomach ached just from talking about it. Nuku called him over and asked him not to make fun of them. He said that there wasn't an ounce of humor in him. In the capital, he may have been a priest working for the Black Princess, but now they're both adventurers, aren't they? It's dangerous work, where you could die at any moment, so why not let them do what they want? She was indignant about this, and loudly told the old man that he shouldn't say such things. Ro turned to Yuika, called out, and asked what they should do. She, with a slightly displeased look, said that she understood everything and agreed to the terms, but she would continue to call him darling as long as they were the only ones here. Barry was very unhappy about this, and Nuku called her and said that they should focus on diving. After that, they continued exploring, and he thought that just like last time, 2 days later they reached the 43rd floor. Now under her command are 7 skeletons, 9 orcs, and 5 imps capable of using magic spells. With a serious expression, she pointed her hand at the monsters in front of her and ordered her monsters to shoot ice arrows and the others to retreat. They later reached the 46th floor, fought the monsters again, and encountered the salamanders, who had the innate gift of a fire cannon. She used the gift of Phantom Needle, managed to capture 6 salamanders, and said, "Great, she'll name them Sarah 1 through 6. Nuku called her and said that he sensed another monster approaching. They must dodge, it's a furry giant. Note, thanks to the fur covering this monster's entire body, physical attacks are useless against it. She called Sarah and said that they must test their abilities. They must reduce it to a mountain of ash. They attacked the monster simultaneously, and she, with a satisfied expression, said that they should concentrate their fire on its flesh. They suppressed the giant with their attacks, and Yuika called him and asked what was wrong. Is this all he can do? He lacks fighting spirit. She began to laugh loudly, and Mazikan called the guy and asked if he was okay. His lips were trembling. They were lovers, weren't they? The protagonist, with a small smile, thought that it was unusual for a person to get so excited during a battle with monsters. She jumped off the cliff she was standing on and said that it seemed Sarah would be good in the subsequent battles. It's a shame, of course, that Neko and Minoran aren't with them this time. She ordered the monsters to line up and said that the list is not bad. They have to get to the 48th floor. When they got there, he thought that this floor hadn't been explored yet, so just one mistake could kill everyone. Sherpa can't do much here. He has to focus on creating the map. Now they are at E4, S24. The dark smith teleported behind them, laughed and said that he knew it. He found the guy with pigtails. MC felt something, turned around and she noticed it and asked, "Is something wrong?" He was looking back and asked, "Doesn't she have the feeling that someone is watching them?" She denied it and said that she didn't feel anything. However, they still need to remain alert. She approached the 2 orcs and said that they will cover their backs. Nuku called his mistress and said there were 3 huge monsters ahead. She said with a smile that she would deal with them. They reached a wide field, but didn't see a single monster nearby, and said that she didn't see anything. She called him and asked if he was sure they were there. He agreed, and Rose said that in that case, these monsters might have the gift of illusion or camouflage. He put his backpack on the ground, bent down, and began to listen. He heard a muffled scraping or rustling, and thought that if you look closely, it was very strange that the moss only glowed in certain places. He said that the monsters were hiding underground. Most likely, these are monsters that can easily move through various types of rock. Yuika thought about this and said that she knew some monsters that fit that description. They are on the lower floors. However, everyone has their own weak points. First, they should know what they are dealing with. Nuku said they needed bait. Luckily, among the monsters with them now were small and agile salamanders. She agreed, called Sarah 6, and said that he should run across the floor. The salamander ran forward, and she said that they would stay here and wait for the enemy to appear. She closely watched what was happening, saw something moving underground, and said that it was approaching. A huge worm emerged from underground, and the protagonist asked, "Is it an Ovion?" She said with a serious expression that these monsters are vulnerable to fire. They should use Sarah's fire cannon. Nuku called her and said that the salamanders cannot move at this time. Against 3 Ovions, they will be their first target. He raised his hand and said that he had an idea. They can each take a salamander. With Barry Sale's air magic, they will be able to move quickly, and the salamanders will be able to use the spell without any problems, right? She asked. So they'll become legs for the salamanders, right? She called out to Sarah and took him in her hand. Mazikin, with a displeased expression, asked if he should participate in this too. Barry, with an indignant expression, loudly said that of course he should stop using levitation. Yuika called out to Darling and said that he should hide here. He agreed, and she ordered a couple of monsters to guard him, and the other monsters to also become bait. They went forward, and she loudly said that they would begin to attack as soon as the rest of the Ovions appeared. He watched this from behind cover and thought that even among the rarest monsters, Ovions are among the strongest. He hoped that this strategy would work, and no one would get hurt. The others began to fight against the monsters, and he thought that the fire cannons were effective. Great, it's only a matter of time. He didn't have time to finish his thought because a dark blacksmith appeared behind him, called him the guy with pigtails, said hello and asked why he needed so many things. Did he do delivery like him or something else? He turned to him, called him with a little surprise, and thought that he had come at such a time. He said that as he saw he was doing well, he was touched by this, and with a happy expression said that he was quite a nice guy. He actually answered him. He looked at the monster guarding him and asked, does he understand that his friends downstairs never answer him? He was so glad to talk to someone. In a conversation, you always need feedback, right? He asked. Does he mean feedback? He fell to the ground and said that in fact, he knows a lot about the surface. He knows that Lady Pamela at the reception is unrealistically beautiful and has a great body. Also, Sleepy's kebabs go well with something called ale, right? He was surprised when he heard this and wondered, hadn't she retired 7 years ago? He decided to play along and said that he knew quite a lot. He thought that although this information was a little outdated, the blacksmith took out a dagger and said with a smile that it was a dagger of memories. You can see the memories of whoever you hit with it. He learned a lot from the adventurers who died in this dungeon. If the body is fresh, then the memories are still clear. He followed them in the hope that they all die, because he wants to see their memories. MC coughed thoughtfully and asked, was this dagger made in a workshop? He agreed and said that it was made in a workshop on the 52nd floor. However, he is only a delivery man. Whoever makes this has a whole production facility. There is an administration and even a collection. However, among the 4 of them, he is the only one who understands how to best use these items. He called it cool and thought that means there are only 4 dark smiths. The lowest floor of the Tyros dungeon should be on the 52nd and 53rd floors. If there is a workshop on the 52nd, then the lowest floor is most likely the 53rd. There are no other monsters on the bottom floor besides the boss. Right now, they are on the 48th floor. It is easier to plan the pass if you know how many floors there are in total. In any case, this monster is sociable. He will see how much information he can get from it. People are trying to completely clear the dungeons, while monsters protect them. One day they will have to fight the dark smiths too. You can't be too closed off, but you can't let your guard down too much either. The blacksmith crawled closer to him, heard loud sounds, and asked what was going on there. Yuika called Darling and said that he could come out. Ro came out to them. The monster was hiding behind him, and he said he was glad they were okay. Barry noticed him, grabbed her weapon, and loudly said that it was the same monster. Nuku approached her and said that she should wait, otherwise she could hurt him too. She mustn't forget that he can teleport, otherwise they will end up like last time. Yuika held on to her sword, called out to Darling, and asked what this meant. He calmly said that he stumbled upon it while hiding. It seemed his workshop was on the 52nd floor. He seemed to know the lower floors well, for example, where the oases were. The blacksmith, in a confused tone, said that of course he knew that. He had been to every corner of this dungeon. He turned to him and asked with a smile that if he asked politely, he would show him the path with the fewest monsters. He called him a guy with pigtails and asked if he would really ask him. He said happily that of course he would show them the way to the oasis. He thought about it and said that only the leader could give him permission to do so. Later, monsters surrounded the blacksmith and pointed their weapons at him. And Yuika stepped aside and said that the shortcut to the oasis would be faster if they could use him like the monsters. She was quite confident in her endurance. Barry said that, however, he would escape before she could use the phantom needle on him. How could they stop his teleportation? Nuku said that no demonic energy was emanating from him, and enemy detection didn't work on him. The protagonist approached them, called him over, and asked if he could feel his energy now. He agreed and asked what he had done. He showed them an item and said that he used this presence isolation pendant to conceal his demonic energy. When he said that they wouldn't trust him until they felt the energy, he immediately gave it to him. He also gave him the boots he used for teleportation. Mazakin extended his hand and asked him to give him these items for evaluation. He took it and said that indeed, the boots had displacement cast on them, and the pendant didn't arouse any suspicions. Yuika asked in surprise, did he tell him about all these things even though no one was controlling him? He agreed and said that his goal was simply to talk to someone. If they got along with him, he could tell them more. She asked if they could use it even without the phantom needle. He said that the probability of this was high, but it was still up to them to decide what to do. He agreed with any decision. She thought about it and said that they will do as Darling says. Barry was surprised by this and asked the princess if she was absolutely sure. She agreed and said that they will allow him to move freely. However, if any problems arise, she will use Darling. MC came to the blacksmith and said that they were given permission. He was very happy about this, but she approached him, called him a monster, and said that he was celebrating too early. They have conditions under which he can continue to talk to the guy with pigtails. First, he follows her orders as the leader. He agreed to this, and she said that he must call her ma'am. He agreed, and she said that secondly, he cannot attack all party members as well as the monsters she controls. Thirdly, no lies. If he breaks even one condition, he will never talk to the guy with pigtails again. Understand? He straightened up, agreed to these terms, and she said, great. From now on, his name is Skull Mask. Rose stood next to him and said with a smile that they should now head to the oasis. He agreed, pointed in the right direction, and said that this is where they should go. Mazakin looked at this and said, he's just leading the monster by the nose like this. This guy is simply incredible. Nuku agreed and said that if he ever became their enemy, he seemed to be the most formidable of all they had ever encountered. Later, he thought that traveling with an intelligent monster was the first time this had happened, not only with the Twilight Sword, but also in the entire history of adventurers. A unique case. The skull mask, the monster's desire to talk. Such a monster shouldn't exist. They had to be on their guard. Yuika said they should hurry. He should lead them to the nearest oasis. He politely agreed and showed them the direction. Barry looked away and asked, "What about that huge passage?" He said that this hole was both a path and not a path. There were traces of ovions everywhere. He once tried to go through there but only ended up going in circles. When he finally got out, he found himself back where he started. If a person gets lost there, they'll most likely just die. The real path, this crevice. Mazakin laughed and said that to beginners, it might seem fatal. Also, if you don't know about it, you can easily miss it. The protagonist marked it on the map, and he climbed into the crevice and said that they should be careful, because it was quite tight. Yuika said that she would send Sarah ahead to light the way. She called Darling and asked if he thought they could get through here. He agreed, and said that he thought they could. He walked along the crevice, and thought that this was a rather unusual structure for a dungeon. If the passage was so tight, then even monsters wouldn't use this path. Nuku called Lady Black Princess and said that the orcs were stuck. She called them and said that they should go in slowly, one at a time. Skullmask called the guy with pigtails and said that the exit was here. He called the others and said that he could already see the exit. He climbed out of the crevice and asked if the oasis was nearby. He stood next to him and said that it was a little ahead. He was surprised by what he saw there, followed by a joyful Barry, but bumped into his backpack. She said with a slightly displeased look that his luggage was blocking the passage. What happened there? Because of what she saw, she loudly called the princess and said that it was just a nightmare. She should go out and see. Yuika climbed out of the crevice, called Darling, and asked what happened here. He called her by name and said that she should look ahead. There is a cliff. She was indignant about this and asked what it meant. She was about to say something else, but the worried blacksmith said that he was not lying. The road continues there. He saw a road next to the cliff and asked, "Is this what he is talking about?" He agreed and said that he has been here many times. Barry asked how he crossed this crevice. He said that it is simple, with the help of boots with movement, so it is very easy to do. MC picked up his shoes and said that he had them now. He was very upset about this, and he offered to give him sandals. Yuika asked if her demons could carry them one at a time. The flying demons lifted one orc, and Nuku said that should work. Skullmask was very happy about this and asked if she was an angel incarnate. He smiled and said that he was exaggerating. By the way, how did he know the word angel? She called 2 monsters, ordered them to carry the orcs, and said that the rest would carry them. He looked to the side and thought that you can't get to that road if you don't know how to fly. He's never seen anything like this, even on maps. What should we call this path? An air bridge? Maybe we should mark it with a symbol? He looked down and said that there was a swarm of blood cockroaches down there. Barry, who was being carried by the monsters after him, was scared by this, and he said that they should try not to look there. She looked very frightened and said that they should move her quickly. Yuika was moved to them. She called her and asked how she was feeling. They hadn't moved everyone yet, but they should go ahead. She called the 5 flying monsters and said that after they moved the monsters one by one, they should follow them. They went further, saw many different passages, and he said that they needed the second cave on the right. Ro asked if these were really all different paths. Having received a positive answer, he began to write it down on the map, and thought that with so many passages here, a later group of adventurers would have a hard time even with a map. Skullmask walked further and said that they need to go there. He thanked him and said that he had helped them a lot. He laughed and said that he seemed like a special person. He thanked him for the compliment, and he asked with a happy look if he could keep these sandals. He allowed it with a smile and said that let it be a sign of gratitude and proof of their friendship. Yuika coughed to get their attention and said that they should go down and rest. He offered to make tea, and she agreed and thanked him for it. Later, he made the tea, brought it to the others, and said that he also took dried fruit as a snack. It was a little sour, but still very tasty. He approached the rest of the team, offered them some too, and they thanked him for it. He turned to Skullmask and said that he had this for him too. He was very happy about this and said that he really was a very good person. He took it in his hand, looked at the dried fruit with excitement, and asked, "Does this mean that people eat this?" He was very surprised because of how delicious it was, and the protagonist laughed and said that he should eat more slowly so as not to choke. Barry noticed the princess's displeased expression and asked what was wrong with her. Yuika, with a serious expression, said that they needed to go through the plan. She called all the team members and asked if they could come here. He agreed, and she called Skullmask and said that he should stay there and sit quietly. When everyone gathered around her, she asked Darling, it was safe to assume that the lowest floor of the dungeon was the 53rd, right? He agreed and said that most likely it was. She sat closer to him and said that they were currently on the 48th floor. Their next goal was the 50th floor. As soon as they found a shortcut, they could return to the surface. Barry looked at them enviously and asked how much longer they would have to drag themselves around with this monster. She turned to her and said that they were very lucky that they didn't get lost, and were able to take a shortcut. It would be better if he walked them to the very end of the route. Nuku covered his face with his hand with a displeased look, and Mazakin chewed on fruit and said that it seemed like they had a bittersweet love triangle here. He called him and politely asked him not to say that. Yuika called Darling and asked if he could ask him about the next step. MC agreed and said that he thought he now understood how to deal with him. By the way, he wanted to ask him about monsters too. He was sure that they would come across some that weren't yet in the monster guide. There was also a chance that they would meet the floor boss. Nuku asked with surprise if he wanted to ask him about bosses too. He said with a smile that he knew it could be risky. He would try to ask him carefully so that he wouldn't suspect anything. She turned to him and asked with a worried look. This was certainly great, but wasn't he getting too close to him? Even if it was for their benefit, he was being too friendly with him. He should remember that he was a monster and an enemy. For some reason, her heart ached from their closeness. He looked a little confused and said he understood her. Barry was very upset because she realized that the princess was jealous for the first time and called her. Mazakin was drinking tea and said that this could be considered advice from the leader. Isn't this all extremely funny? Yuika stood up and said that they had rested well. They could continue. She called Skullmask and said that they were going even lower. He should show them the shortest route. He agreed and asked if there would be more delicious food. Ro looked at him with a smile and said that maybe there would be. He agreed and said that then they should hurry. He led them to the slope, laughed and said that being with adventurers was a lot of fun. He walked alongside, looked around and asked if he wasn't strolling with his comrades, the dark smiths. He didn't know enough, so he'll just make a sketch. The blacksmith denied what he had said earlier and said that he had invited them, but no one had answered him. He looked at him and asked, "By the way, he speaks their language well, but he has no one to talk to, right? The local monsters don't answer him either." He agreed and said that they don't answer him, but one of them sang while using a spell. So it seems they should understand the language. That's why he constantly tries to talk to them. He thought about the singing. They must be high-level monsters since they can put meaning into words. Maybe they are even floor bosses. He looked back. Yuika noticed this and nodded to him. He said that he was interested in his friends. What class are they? Skullmask walked ahead and said that he doesn't know at all. All the names of the monsters he knew came from the memories of people who died in the dungeon. He stepped in something liquid, and Nuku called out to Lady Black Princess and said that a monster appeared behind them. She asked, "Only one monster?" This is a very rare occurrence for the lower floors. The protagonist heard the sound of a rolling boulder and thought that the only kind of monster that appears on the floor alone is a monster. He turned to them and loudly said that it was a killing ball. If it catches them, they will be finished. Note, the killing ball rolls, filling the entire corridor of the dungeon and destroying everything in its path. They quickly ran forward and Skullmask asked, so what he stepped in earlier was the crushed monster. They noticed that the passage forked, and he said in a serious tone that they should all go to the right. The blacksmith was surprised by this and loudly said that this passage is wider. The ball will fit in there without a problem. He said in a decisive tone that everything would be fine. They should quickly run into this passage. They managed to run into the passage, and the ball rolling behind them turned left. Barry noticed this and asked, however, why did it turn there? He said that there were a couple of reports about killing balls, but he remembered that one of the oldest guides said that the group managed to survive by choosing a wider passage. Skullmask called out to him with admiration and said that he knew so much. Even he, a monster, did not know about this, as expected of his friend. Yuika laughed with a satisfied smile and asked, "He is amazing, isn't he? After all, he is her darling." Barry was shocked by what happened and wondered if she was competing with a monster. A huge monster was crawling next to them, a sign that the carnival on the unexplored floor was silently following them. Later, she called out to him and said that the enemy was approaching. They both should hide somewhere. He agreed. They went to the side with Mazakin, and MC asked if he had ever seen them fight. When they answered in the negative, he said that it was better for him to close his eyes. For a monster like him, this could be quite shocking. A slime man crawled towards them, a special ability of this species, physical resistance. Nuku looked at this huge monster and said that he felt the presence of 7. She stood nearby and said that it meant they had merged into one. She called 5 of Sara and said that they should climb onto the slime, simultaneously shooting fire. Slime monsters are not very resistant to fire. They will support them until it disintegrates. He turned around and said loudly that 3 more monsters were moving from the opposite side. She called all the orcs and ordered them to protect them from behind. 3 minotaurs emerged from the darkness. She laughed and said that this was wonderful. They should attack the one in front. She split the group of skeletons to attack the monsters from the side. She called Barry and said that she should use magic to immobilize the slime man. She called 2 flying monsters and said that they should obey her commands. She also ordered the other 2 monsters to obey Nuku's commands and said that he should provide support to the orcs and skeletons. He agreed. And she, with a confident smile, took out her sword and said that they should bring the carnival to an end. At the same time, a frightened Skullmask called out to the guy with pigtails and asked if he could push him in the shoulder. When can he open his eyes? Something pushed him in the shoulder and he asked if it was really over already and he could open his eyes. He became even more scared when he saw that it was an orc's head and said loudly that that's what hit him. He fainted. Mazakin said so, and Ro said that it was even better for him this way. He took a notebook and thought about writing about how the battle was going. He wrote that thanks to the salamander's fire, the slime split up, and Barry immobilized it with the help of imps. All 7 were caught by the phantom needle. The minotaurs were still in formation, but the slow-moving slime was surprisingly energetic. Yuika called out to Puyo from 1 to 7 and said that they should hold off the minotaurs with their tentacles. The slimes immediately listened to her and grabbed the minotaurs. She jumped towards them, used the phantom needle skill, and then said that all the monsters should line up. She used the heal monster spell on them, and in the end, she had 3 salamanders, 7 slimes, 3 minotaurs, and 1 imp under her control. She looked at them with a thoughtful look and said that the offensive force was weak. She suggested they continue on their way, called Darling, and asked what was wrong with Skull Mask. He was carrying it with one hand and said he had fainted. He asked for a second to come to his senses and offered them a snack. Hearing this, he immediately came to his senses, stood up, and happily said that he also wanted to eat. The protagonist asked with a smile, but first, they'll get to the oasis on the 49th floor, okay? Nuku looked at this with a confused look and thought that it seemed like he was holding him on a short leash. Later, they set up camp near the oasis, and while they were resting and treating their wounds, they managed to get a garrison and 1 skeleton knight with the gift of explosion. After that, they finally reached the final point of their dive, the 50th floor. He walked ahead and thought that the Twilight Sword Squad's level was 12th, but the recommended level for this place was 16. Even though they're conserving their strength, fatigue is quickly building up. It seems they should prepare something light at the next pass. They also need to prepare health and sanity potions. Skull Mask exclaimed with slight surprise, which caught his attention, and he asked, "What's wrong? Are they lost?" He denied it and said he seemed to remember this place. When he came to visit his friend, he often teleported to a nearby place. He just didn't notice it at first because he was walking here abruptly. This caught Yuik's attention, and MC asked, "Does that mean his friend is nearby?" He said that's usually the case, but not always. He's quite gloomy, but super huge, so it shouldn't be hard to find him. Their faces also look a bit similar. He was a little confused by this and thought that it wasn't like he knew what his face looked like because of the mask. They came to a large empty cave and Skull Mask said that he wasn't in the right place after all. He usually talks to him here. He looked around and thought that it was terribly dark here. They heard the sound of hooves, which made him very scared, and said loudly that it meant that they would appear here soon. What should they do? He was surprised by his reaction and asked, "Aren't they friends?" He loudly denied it and said that they were sworn enemies. They once pulled out his hair and ate it. This hair is very dear to him. He got it from dead people whom he found in the dungeon and attached it here 1 hair at a time. It took a very long time. He doesn't want to go through something like that again. He started to run away, said goodbye to them, and Ro asked him to wait and said that he forgot his boots and pendant. He said that he had fun, so he could keep it. Besides, they are cursed after all. They will see each other again someday. However, next time they may already meet as enemies. After all, monsters exist to protect the dungeon. Yuika noticed that Skull Mask had escaped and asked Nuka how many enemies were coming here. He said there were 13 of them, all coming from the front. They seemed to be moving in a group. She called out to Buyo and said that they should form a defensive formation, shoulder to shoulder. The slimes formed a wall, and she called out to Minoran and said that they should prepare their spears, and Gi should cover their backs. Naisuke and Sara should protect her darling and Mazuken. The clatter of hooves grew louder, and they heard the loud cry of these monsters. The protagonist saw these monsters and said that they were bicorns. If they hit you with their horns, the wound would rot until they died. With a determined expression, she called out to Buyo and ordered her to block their path. The monsters crashed into the slimes, and they began to absorb them. Yuika walked calmly towards them and said that they were more useful in defense than she expected. They captured a whole group of monsters so easily. She used the Phantom Needle skill on them and said that his name would be Yagi-1. She continued to use the skill on the monsters and gave them names with different numbers. After that, she ordered them to line up, and Barry called her and asked if they were more like horses. Nuku called the mistress and said that there were 6 more enemies ahead. They looked over and MC said that they were skeletons, but they didn't even have armor or weapons. She smiled and said that it was just in time. They could try Yagi on them. She ordered them to attack the skeletons, and they handled it with ease. He called her again and warned her about 6 more monsters. He was a little surprised by this and thought that they were more skeletons without any weapons. Is this their territory or something? A few more times, 6 skeletons came to them, which she defeated with the help of her monsters. Yuika was a little confused by this and asked, "What's going on?" It was as if they were going only to their death. A magic circle appeared in the air above Yagi, which immediately attracted their attention. Dark energy burst from this magic circle, and she loudly ordered Buyo to take a defensive stance. They all heard a very loud noise that made them cover their ears, and Ru wondered what that sound was. She loudly called out to Yagi and ordered them to run from there. When the dark magical energy disappeared, she noticed with surprise that the Yagi were gone. Barry noticed something from above, pointed her finger, and asked them to look at it. They all felt a pressure squeezing their hearts, which carried away common sense, as if their heads refused to think. A huge skeleton appeared next to them, casting the gate to the underworld spell. He looked at it and thought that he felt as if only fear existed. It was the King of the Dead, born in despair, a top-ranking undead monster. Mazakan was the first to overcome his fear and immediately cast the Moonblade spell. The boss of the 50th floor cast the Counterbell spell and reflected his attack. He looked at it with a serious expression and said that it meant he could reflect magical attacks. His spell flew off into the ceiling, and this was the signal for the battle to begin. They all came to their senses, quickly drew their weapons, and took up fighting stances. Yuika loudly declared that Minoran 1 and 2 should deal with the skeletons, and the last one should remain in reserve. Booyah 1 through 7 should make their way through the darkness to the king. The protagonist took something out of his backpack, called out to Mazikan, and said that he should use these mana potions. He took it, attached it to his belt, and said with a small smile that it looked like he would have to participate after all. He became curious. He called the Black Princess and said that he would try to attack them with his magic, and asked to borrow the Minotaurs for support. She agreed and said that G from 1 to 4 should also remain in reserve and wait there. Darling should stay behind them. He agreed and asked them all to be careful. She agreed, ran forward and called Nuka, Barry and Naisuke after her. They ran past the Minotaurs who were fighting skeletons and headed towards the boss. He used the gate to the underworld spell again and summoned the skeletons again. She noticed this, called Naisuke and ordered her to deal with them. With their combined efforts, they defeated a group of skeletons and continued to break through. The King of the Dead clapped his hands and cast the funeral prayer spell. He released a powerful sound wave, causing them to cover their ears with their hands and unable to move. The boss began to use the drain spell. Mazikan was very worried about this and loudly said that this was very bad. It was an attack on the soul. If it hit them, the soul itself would die. They must dodge. They all barely avoided this attack, and the dark energy released by the monster disappeared. Yuika loudly called out to Barry and said that the enemy was behind her. She was surprised by this and attacked with her dagger, but the skeleton stopped her attack with its teeth and grabbed her head. She immediately called out to Sarah and ordered her to help her. The salamander ran up to her and killed the monster with fire. She thanked the princess for this and said that she would use the salamander, like back then with the Ovions. She agreed and ordered them to obey her orders. She turned around and loudly said that they needed to eliminate one of the king's hands. They should focus on attacking this. Everyone immediately agreed, and MC looked at this and thought that funeral prayer and wither, the combination of the two attacks, is very dangerous. If they hadn't attacked from afar, they could have fallen under this attack that erased all the bicorns. Even if they managed to get close to him, he is defending himself with countless skeletons that he summons. If only they could find some hole in his defense. Nuku, with a serious expression on his face, attacked with his weapon and used the throw skill. The King of the Dead used the Counterbell spell. He noticed this and, with a surprised expression, thought that he can reflect not only magic but also physical attacks. Yuika said loudly that perhaps he can't reflect everything at the same time. They should attack continuously. They agreed. He prepared to use the shot skill, and Barry flew up behind the boss. She loudly told the salamander that he should prepare to use fire cannon. They attacked from different sides at the same time and didn't let him use his spell. The boss screamed loudly in pain, and she called out to Naisuke and said that he should use explosion on his hand now. However, the boss called him a familiar and ordered him to obey him. He knelt down, unable to move, and she called out to him with a confused look and asked what was wrong with him. He should get up and attack the king. He threw his sword to the ground and grabbed her by the throat, which she didn't expect. Everyone was very worried about this, and she called out to him, asked him to let her go, and asked why he was no longer obeying. Ro became worried about this and wondered if the king could really control the skeleton knights too. She called out to the Bio 7 and ordered them to capture him. The slime quickly crawled towards him, captured him, and he let her go. She caught her breath after what had happened and said that they had lost some of their fighting power. But unfortunately, it was unavoidable. She called Buyo from 1 to 6 and said that they must continue to advance through the darkness and immobilize the king with their tentacles. He used the spell Gate to the Underworld, and she said in a dissatisfied tone that he had summoned even more skeletons. There was no end to them. The King of the Dead was about to use the spell Drain, but Barry jumped to attack him and told the salamander to attack with magic. However, the boss attacked her with his tail and threw her into the ground with great force. They were worried about this, and she called the monsters and ordered them to take care of the skeletons. He continued to summon skeletons, and Mazakan created a magic circle under this monster and used the spell High Explosive Cannon. He released a very strong stream of energy, and when the dust cleared, he said with surprise that he was able to dodge. He's pretty agile for his size, isn't he? In any case, it looks like he didn't get out unscathed. The Limousin King's spine was slightly broken, and he used the funeral prayer spell, She became worried about this and loudly warned the others about another wave. The protagonist watched from the side and thought that the battle had dragged on. But then he had an idea. Their usual tactics wouldn't work here. Yuiko loudly said that they needed to get rid of his hands first. She attacked the skeletons that were approaching them, called out to Nuka, and he understood her, and said that he wouldn't allow him to cast a single spell. Barry jumped behind him again and loudly said that he was drawing magic circles. She commanded the salamander to use magic, and he did so. She hit with this spell, but the Limousin King still used the Swamp of Darkness spell. A magic circle appeared under her skeletons, and she noticed it and said that they should run away from the magic circle. They all started to scatter, but one of them didn't make it in time and fell under the spell. MC noticed this and thought that he was sucked into the quagmire. She calmly watched this and thought that it was great that the three of them succeeded. The boss used the Drain spell, and she loudly called out to G4 and ordered him to use the Blizzard spell on him to stop him. The skeleton did so, he succeeded, and Barry, from a long distance, held a salamander in her hands, which used magic. The King of the Dead dodged this attack, and Yuika watched this and wondered, was he starting to predict their attacks? She called out to G4 and ordered him to use the spell again. She also called her and told her to use the fire cannon spell. The monster dodged the attack again, and she smiled and said that it was great. Everything was as she planned. The edge of the boss's robe was grabbed by a slime crawling nearby. She was surprised by what happened and said that she understood everything. He was very slow, so she made him come closer. She called out loudly for Maziken. He understood everything and used the Moonblade spell. The monster used the Counterbell spell to reflect this spell, but he used the duplicate skill and launched another spell. It is a gift that allows you to copy any spell just used, but it costs twice as much mana. His attack hit and he was able to cut off two of the monster's arms. They were happy about what happened, and he drank a mana potion and asked, "It only took 2 arms, right? That's not so bad." Ro watched from behind cover and thought that he couldn't use Counterbell twice in a short period of time. He realized this and immediately took advantage. The advantage was now on the Twilight Sword's side. The slime man had the gift of physical resistance, so it was very difficult to weaken his grip. Yuika loudly ordered Minoran 3 to move forward and said that they should continue the offensive. The boss used the Drain spell, and he watched from afar and thought that it was not a direct attack. She loudly called out to G1 and 3 and ordered them to protect her and Nuku. They hid behind the monsters, and the attack only hit them. With a serious expression, she told him to use the sledgehammer and said that they should simply use them as shields. It was good that Minoran 3 was not injured. Now he must destroy this monster's right arms. The Minotaur ran towards him and he clapped his hands and used the funeral prayer spell. Magical energy hit the monster, leaving multiple wounds on its body. He ran closer and swung his axe, but the boss used a Drain spell and hit its head. Yuika called out loudly and ordered it to attack its right arm. Its eyes sparkled and it tensed all its muscles for a final attack. The Minotaur cut off its arm, but it grabbed its head and tore it off. Barry was surprised by this and said that the Minotaur was dead. Yuika calmly agreed and said that it was a great loss, but it took another arm. The protagonist watched this with a serious expression and thought that her monsters were fearless. No matter how terrible the enemy's attack, they could not disobey or retreat, only continue to attack. The King of the Dead used the Gate to the Underworld spell and began to regrow its arm, and she loudly called out to G4 and ordered it to freeze that arm. He did so, and Mazikan used the Earthen Fortress spell. He created a large ice cliff behind him so he couldn't escape. Nuku saw this as a perfect opportunity to attack and used the throw skill to attack his arm. One of these arms cracked, and Barry grabbed her daggers and jumped towards this monster, promising to shred this monster. She used the Gift of Edge, which allows you to cut anything the blade touches. She cut off the 4th arm, and the badly damaged monster used the Swamp of Darkness spell. He created a magic circle under Yuika, but she jumped back and loudly ordered GI4 to flee from there. However, he couldn't, and was absorbed by black magical energy. Nuku looked at the monster, loudly called out to the mistress, and said that the slime man was under drain. MC noticed this and thought that almost all the monsters have fallen. Yuika used the leap skill and leaped upward with great speed. It's a gift that increases strength for a short period of time. This battle depends on split seconds. Will her sword attack first, or the king's hand? However, at the very last moment, a smile flickered across her face. She plunged her sword into the King of the Dead's eye socket, and before he could use magic, she used the Phantom Needle gift and stopped him. She drew her sword and said that from now on, his name is Litz. She landed on the ground and said that the ruler of the Shadow Realm must obey her. Nuku said it was the boss of the 50th floor. Now that she finally got him, the picture looks terrifying. Yuika agreed and said that for him, they lost a total of 26 monsters. Only Naisuke, Buyo, and Sara remain. She would like to increase their numbers, but first they need to rest. She will put Litz on guard duty, and Darling should prepare the potions. He agreed, looked down and asked, "Is the floor moving?" They were all surprised by this, and she asked loudly, "Are they enemies again?" Barry asked with a surprised expression. "Why is the floor shaking so much?" Rose said that it seemed like the floor was changing, an anomaly that happens once every few years. The floor began to collapse under their feet, and a worried Yuika said loudly that this would separate them. They should stay as close to each other as possible. He and Barry began to fall down, and she called out to the princess in a worried tone. He was about to call her, and she noticed this, called out to them loudly, was about to use the gift and promised to save them. However, the ground between them rose to separate them, and they noticed that the passage was closing. She was very worried about this and called out to the two of them. At the same time, she lost consciousness and thought that she was seeing this dream again. In difficult times, she always dreams of her past squad, which was destroyed. The one who saved her in that difficult moment was Yuika. If they leave the labyrinths as they are, the whole world will be infected with magic and fall. Therefore, to save it, they must clear all the dungeons. When she spoke of this absurd plan, her eyes shone brighter than anyone else in this world. She wanted her eyes to shine just as dazzlingly. She wanted to stay by her side longer than anyone else and help her more than anyone else. The princess was the first and only person who gave her hope. This was her light. She came to her senses, and the protagonist called her and said that she finally opened her eyes. She immediately covered her eyes with her hands and said loudly that he should turn off this lamp right now. She sat up and asked if he was trying to burn her or something like that. He said that he looked around here a bit. It looks like this passage was formed as a result of a collapse. A straight road without branches and arenas. There are no monsters nearby yet. She tied her hair and said with a serious expression that they needed to find the princess. She should be somewhere nearby. He looked at her and said that it was dangerous to move anywhere without thinking. She wanted to object, but he said that she should think about how they were separated. Yuika and the others were probably together. There was also a skeleton knight standing next to them, but he was doing nothing. This was proof that her phantom needle was still working. Barry thought about it and said that he seemed right. He said with a small smile that as long as Nuku was with them, they could move with much greater safety than they could. So he suggested believing in them and waiting here. He handed her a recovery potion and asked her to drink it. He approached the monster standing nearby and said that the skeleton knight had lost his left arm and shield, but he still had his sword. She started drinking the potion and called him careless. She was very surprised when she heard a loud sound and started coughing. She turned towards the sound and was about to ask something, but he was holding a sword in his hands and said that he thought this sword might be useful to him. The strength requirement is 35 points to be able to wield it with both hands. He hopes there is no curse on it. He stabbed the sword into the rock, and she asked loudly, "What is it doing?" MC said that he heard rumors that after the collapses, the walls and floor are soft. They can't use it for now because it crumbles too easily. However, when it hardens, this passage will be useful if something happens. He invited her to sit down and said that they need to discuss tactics. Even if it is temporary, they are one party. If monsters appear, they will have to fight them. So it's time for them to discuss stats and gifts. He is a level 7 adventurer and also a heavy warrior. His gift is stamina recovery, 4th class. She was surprised and said that, however, the highest class is 3rd. Based on adventurers and the Galactica Guild Church, he agreed and said that he asked to keep it a secret since he had never told anyone before. She knows about the choice between a gift and a stat increase when you level up. Except for level 1, when he received stamina recovery, he chose the strength increase every time. That's why he currently has 31 strength points. If you look at this alone, he can compete with high-level adventurers. She slapped her face with a displeased expression and thought that he was a real idiot. She needed to pull herself together since she was level 11. He called her and said that she should also tell him about her abilities. All this is for the sake of surviving and reuniting with Yuika. She, with a displeased look, hesitantly said that there was nothing to be done. After her story, he said that if they ran into 5 monsters at once, they would not win. However, he had an idea on how to make it happen. He asks her to cast Wind Dance on his arms. It's a support magic that instantly increases strength, right? If she can increase the strength of his arms, he'll be able to use this broadsword. Barry asked, but his strength is 31 points, and the requirements for the broadsword are 35, aren't they? If he doesn't fully meet the requirements, he'll be exhausted almost immediately. She remembered his gift, and he said he'd be taking on the tank role, so she should stick behind him and attack when she sees an opportunity. He trusts her with his life. She was surprised by this, agreed and asked, so be it. It works both ways, right? They heard some sounds, and she asked, it took a little while, right? It's a minotaur. Ro looked at this monster and asked, was it just him or did he look somehow angry? He gripped the sword in his hands tighter when the monster roared loudly and ran towards them and swung his axe. He dealt a very strong blow with his weapon and she was thrown back by a strong gust of air. She sat up and thought that it was just a shockwave. She knew it was impossible for them to stand against such a monster. However, when the dust cleared, she saw that he held back the monster's attack with his sword. She was surprised by this and asked, did he hold out against a minotaur, a monster with immense strength? He continued to block the monster's attacks, turned around and loudly called out to Barry. She immediately came to her senses, jumped towards the Minotaur, and used the gift of edge again. She stabbed the Minotaur's arm with her dagger, and, with a tense look, wondered if that was all the damage her strike had done. How strong were his muscles? The protagonist called her and said that she had done well and that she should attack in the same place. She agreed, and he continued to block all of the Minotaur's attacks. She waited for the right moment, jumped towards the monster, and attacked again with her dagger, using her gift. Immediately after, she jumped aside and thought, great, this time the cuts were deeper. She jumped behind him, and slowly, but their cooperation grew with each passing second. The fight with the Minotaur became a war of attrition. The monster let out a very loud and angry roar, and Barry said that it seemed to have gone berserk. The Minotaur began to attack more actively with his axe, and he blocked it and warned her of the danger. Due to many very strong blows, the blade of his sword began to crack. She became worried about this, ran to him, and thought that he needed help. She tried to attack with her gift, but the monster pushed her away with his muscles. He continued to block all of the Minotaur's attacks, and she, with a surprised look, wondered how much the wind dance increased his strength, how he was still standing. How did he manage to stand on his feet? She remembered his words, jumped towards the monster, and thought that this guy believed in her and her strength. With a serious expression on her face, she struck hard with her daggers and managed to inflict a deep wound. The monster felt intense pain, threw her away with a wave of his hand, and continued attacking him with his weapon. He was about to continue attacking with his axe, but due to the wounds he received, he stopped and fell to the ground. She was confused by this and asked if the Minotaur ran out of stamina. She was glad when she realized what had happened, and with a joyful expression said that it worked. They won. They survived the fight with the Minotaur. He was also exhausted after this battle. He lowered his sword, and blood was running down his hands. She noticed this and with a worried look asked loudly, "Is this the opposite effect? She will heal him now." MC with a calm smile called her and asked if she was okay. She agreed, ran to his backpack and said that he should sit down and she would get him a potion. He thanked her, lay down on the ground and said how glad he was that their plan still worked. He thought that such fatigue had fallen upon him as if he had never had the 4th level of stamina recovery. Barry returned, called him and said that she was bringing him everything she could find. She gave him a health potion and asked him to drink it. He agreed and thanked her. She came up behind him and said that now the wounds needed to be treated with healing ointment, so he should take off his cloak. She began to take off the cloak but didn't expect it to be so heavy and loudly asked, "What kind of cloak is this? Even armor would be lighter. Is it made of iron?" He denied it and said it was made of heavy silver, which drops from a rare monster, a silver plate. This silver is resistant to all types of magical attacks, but is many times heavier than any other metal and impossible to work with. That's why they call it not a thing, but a complete disappointment. She opened the jar of ointment with a surprised expression and asked, "But he somehow sewed this cape, didn't he?" Ro agreed and said that he melted it down into plates, placed them on a wooden blank, and beat them into the desired shape. She asked why he bothered with it if there were other types of armor. He said with a smile that weight didn't matter much to him, and he also thought it would be funnier that way. She was shocked by this, and he laughed and said that silver plates mostly lived on the 13th floor, which was intended for new adventurers. She asked, so that's why they started calling him the Floor Devourer. He no longer remembered this, and said that the Adventurers Guild had given him a quest to exterminate the owlbear, so he began his descent to the 13th floor. He remembered the past and thought that the owlbear was the floor boss wandering around the dungeon. He had taken the lives of many adventurers who were just starting out. However, if he was killed, he would be reborn after half a month. He, who was then a middling adventurer, hunted down the owlbear time and again. 3 years later, he managed to find a respawn point. By blocking one of the passages, he redirected the flow of magical elements and got rid of the monster forever. Thus, the 13th floor, which was feared to be the death floor, became passable for entry-level adventurers. She was surprised when she remembered what had happened earlier and asked if he didn't have a bad reputation at the bar. He said with a carefree smile that while tracking an owlbear, he accidentally stumbled upon silver discs. He decided to hunt them too. He could understand why they thought he had claimed all the floors for himself. She asked with a confused look, "How about telling everyone else?" The Minotaur failed to throw him back with his attack precisely because he was held in place by the weight of his cloak and the broadsword. In fact, a friend of his had once scolded him for this idea. He finally found something to say. This was the first time such a chance had presented itself. She was confused by what she heard, smiled, and said that he was even stranger than she imagined. The protagonist smiled and asked if adventurers were all like that. Didn't she think so? She laughed and said that was indeed the case. And so, having defeated the Minotaur with their combined efforts, they began to get along well. The spontaneous conversation that began naturally didn't last long. Barry heard a sound and said that it was the chime of the Furin of Wishes. Time to pack up camp. The ringing was coming from the same place where the Minotaur had come from. It was a supporting air magic that allowed sounds to be heard from a specified location. She noticed a monster flying above and loudly warned it about it, saying that it was a stone gargoyle. Note: since their bodies are composed of hard stone, physical attacks against them are almost useless. He thrust his sword into the ground and said loudly that he would take the monster's attack on his sword, and she should brace herself against his back. They withstood this attack, and he thought that the broadsword had cracked. If such a blow fell on a body, there would be nothing to bury. The monster grabbed him by the back, and she swung her dagger, but stopped when she heard a ringing sound. She turned around and thought, They could barely cope with one gargoyle, but then another one appeared. She wouldn't have time to use the spell. She loudly called out to him and said that he should be careful. The monster crashed into her at high speed and threw her several meters to the side. MC became worried about this, called out to her loudly and asked if she was okay. She didn't answer, and he squeezed the sword in his hand tighter. With great difficulty pulled it out of the ground and threw the gargoyle to the side. He turned around, his expression tense as he thought about getting Barry out of there as quickly as possible. The escaped gargoyle might return. She called out to him and said that the wishing Furin was ringing again. There were quite a few of them to the right and left, on both sides. He realized this and said that she should hide in the cave. He stood before her at the cave entrance and said that they should cast wind dance on his hands. She should keep casting it so that the spell wouldn't wear off. He gritted his teeth with tension as a true tragedy began to unfold. 2 days had passed since the collapse. Yuika and the others had been searching for their missing comrades all this time. They were barely able to stand, and their anxiety continued to grow. The group was led by Nuku, who had the gift of detection. He thought with a tense expression that detection found monsters by the magical currents emanating from them, so it wasn't suitable for finding lost friends. He felt a chilling energy and a mocking aura behind him. For 2 days, they hadn't managed to find a single clue. The Black Princess and the esteemed Mazakan were already beginning to lose patience. How could he tell them that his gift didn't seek out people? At the fork, he suggested going right, thinking that if this continued, exhaustion and hunger would take their toll, and they would be completely exhausted. He sighed and quietly said that they needed to find the luggage as soon as possible. Yuika heard this, and asked if the dear fellow himself was okay. There was no need to worry. Had she understood correctly? He denied it and said that even if they found the luggage, they wouldn't be able to get to the surface without the Sherpa himself. Of course, he would want him safe and sound. Mazikan laughed and asked, by the way, would they also push the girl into the background? Nuku tensed up even more because of this, denied it, and said that he and Barry had been fighting side by side for so many years. Of course, he wanted her to be okay too. They walked forward, and he stopped and thought that he shouldn't have said anything. He flinched in fear when Litz patted him on the shoulder. He turned around and, with a slightly worried look, wondered what was wrong with that monster. Had it really decided to cheer him up? She called him and asked why he was stuck there. He was supposed to show them the way. He agreed and said that there were monsters ahead, about 3 of them. A Cerberus came out to them. He was going to warn them about it, and Yuika called the King of the Dead in a serious tone and ordered them to attack. He used the Swamp of Darkness spell, and he apologized and said that there was only one 3-headed Cerberus. She said that he usually didn't make such mistakes. Litz patted him on the head, and she was surprised and said loudly that he wasn't allowed to attack it. What did he even expect? Mazakan said that the monster just decided to sympathize with their friend. She thought about it, apologized, and said that she had treated him too harshly. He said that he also admits his guilt. Nuku asked them not to worry, shed a tear, and thought that this monster understood all the intricacies of human relationships. She walked forward with a sad expression and thought that they had gone through so many labyrinths that she had already lost count. She had never before experienced a search in her life that exuded such hopelessness. She had been friends with Barry for so many years. She had always been there for her, just like a younger sister who did not want to leave her older sister's side for a single step. Of course, she wants her to be okay. However, as adventurers, they had to be prepared for the fact that they could lose each other at any moment. They met Darling about 2 weeks ago, and they had only been lovers for 10 days. Such a short time is not enough to fall irrevocably in love with someone and truly make them a part of your life. She had not yet become so attached to him and had not given him her heart, so she would be okay even if he was gone. Nuku called the Black Princess and said there were many monsters ahead. It looked a lot like a carnival. She asked with slight surprise, "Is there a carnival in this passage?" She found it strange and asked with a worried look, "Were they really there?" She and Mazakan ran forward, her heart pounding, and she thought she was afraid to find out the truth. Perhaps all these monsters were attracted there by the smell of human corpses. They encountered crowned lizardmen, and with a tense look, she thought that the adventurer and Sherpa, left without a group, had no chance of survival. He asked the princess to duck and use the Moonblade spell. She began to cry from the realization, and she thought that if her darling died, she would not be able to bear it. He again warned the princess that she should go left and use the unstoppable soul killer spell. She jumped aside, drew her sword, and thought that she had enough of thinking about his death. She bounced off the walls as she moved forward, thinking that he was a first-class Sherpa, so he should definitely figure out how to stay alive. A fan-eared head monster stood in her way and immediately attacked her with its tongue. She used her skill to speed up, clenched her teeth from the tension, and thought that this is why the tears should stop. She wanted to believe that he was alive. Mazakan attacked the monster behind her with his magic, and she continued running forward, and used the gift phantom needle on the bighorn monster. She jumped to the ground and said that his name would be Nekusak, and that he should fight the rest of the monsters. She continued running and thought that she really wanted to meet him again. She saw MC standing near the cave he dug in a terrible state and shuddered with fear before calling out to him. Yuika examined it and wondered what was with this useless sword. It didn't even look like a sword. The leather cape was covered in soot and torn. There were traces of fire, lightning, and ice on it. What kind of monsters attacked him? An empty, unseeing look. His clothes were soaked in blood that they had turned dark crimson. He was almost unconscious, but he continued to stand. She began to cry and thought they had known each other for only a short time, so she would be fine even if she never saw him again? What nonsense. No matter how much time had passed since they met, even those 10 days they spent as lovers meant unimaginably much. She went to him, called darling, and thought that her heart already belonged to him. She hugged him, called again, and said that it was she. He no longer needed to fight. He called her name with great difficulty and said that Barry was in this cave. She has a fracture and depleted magical powers. She needs urgent treatment. Mazikin ran into the cave, called her, and said that there are no more monsters. She should stop using magic. She lay with her eyes closed and called him Dad. Nuku ran to them and said that they needed first aid. Yuika was confused by this, called Litz, ordered them to guard the perimeter, and asked if there was anything to stop the bleeding. Ro closed his eyes and thought that everyone had survived. She tearfully held a rag to his face and asked they should treat the wounds and all return to the surface together, okay? 2 days after the Twilight Sword returned to the surface, a hospital for heroes, located near the entrance to the labyrinth. He was placed in a small ward for especially important patients, located on the very top floor. He sighed and with a tense expression thought that he was very grateful that they took on the treatment of him, but such luxury would be the stuff of nightmares. There's a whole bathtub of undiluted magic potions here, a mountain of hemostatic mixtures, so much high-class healing magic, as if they want to resurrect the dead. Earlier, he came to the doctor and said that he was already completely healthy and wanted to be discharged. He adjusted his glasses, refused him, and said that the Twilight Sword ordered him to heal him so that not even a scratch remained. He thought that if Yuika came by tomorrow, he would ask her to help with the discharge. He heard a knock on his door, assumed it was the doctor, and allowed her in. She opened the door, greeted Darling, and said that she came to visit him. Can she come in? He called her and said that she did not even need to ask about it. He was surprised when he saw that she was wearing a snow-white dress and said that she usually did not wear such things. She said that Barry picked it out for dinner parties, but such places are not for her. Today she wore it for the first time. How does he like it? He said with a smile that she was irresistible. She was glad to hear it, sat down next to him, and the protagonist said that she hardly rested during the last descent. Had she at least gotten enough sleep when they returned? She agreed with a smile and said that she lay down for a minute and woke up after a day and a half. At lunchtime, she went to check on Barry. He, with a slightly worried expression on his face, said that it seems she was sent to a hospital that deals with bone fractures. How is she? Is she okay? She said with a smile that she herself was not worried at all. But Mazikan was very nervous. She told her about how he did not lose his composure and told her to take shelter in that cave. She is very grateful to him for saving her life. Also, as she understood, she wanted to apologize for her behavior. Will he accept the apology? He agreed, and she was glad about this, but thought about something and turned away. She mumbled something very quietly, and he noticed it and called her by name. She turned to him, and he asked what was wrong with her. She was very nervous and still asked if she could climb up there. He didn't quite understand her, but agreed to it. After that, she lay down next to him on the bed and covered herself with a blanket. He looked at her and thought that it was an expensive dress. It would wrinkle. Yuika asked with embarrassment, by the way, how was he feeling? He felt that she smelled of flowers. He also began to get nervous and said that he was quite healthy. He was ready to defeat even a minotaur with his bare hands. Therefore, he would like to be discharged tomorrow. He noticed that she lowered her head and called her by name. She said that since she became an adventurer, she felt scared for the first time. Right after the collapse that separated them, and until the moment they met again, her heart was gripped by a paralyzing terror for a second. Her head was filled with excuses for abandoning them, one after another. It hurt so much that she wanted to rip her heart out just to feel nothing. However, when she saw that passage teeming with monsters, she immediately imagined finding their corpses. Her darling believed in her and never doubted her for a second. However, she even thought about what to do if there were no survivors. This was her, the person who should have believed in him like no one else. She asked for forgiveness, and he thought that she was one of those who cling to their principles to the last. That's why she has such a strong spirit, pure as the night sky. He hugged her and said that he does not recognize love that believes blindly, the ability to act, despite the complete chaos in her head, to turn any situation to her advantage. This is precisely one of her wonderful sides. Logical conclusions are one thing, but the desires of the heart are quite another. He believed in her and knows that she believed in him too. So she is still very good, and he loves her like this. She was touched by this, leaned towards him, called darling, and kissed him. They continued kissing for a while, and he was a little nervous and thought that things were bad. He didn't even know how to take off this dress. He didn't see any buttons or knots, Maybe it was hidden under the frills? Yuika touched his lips and said that he said that at times like this, it's okay to act like a naughty kitten. She started rubbing her head against his face, and he thought that she really was like a kitten. With a face very red from embarrassment, she called darling and said that that's why she asked him to be gentle with her. She began to imitate the behavior of a cat and thought that maybe she should ask Tay about it someday. The next morning, they woke up in bed and MC wished her good morning with a smile. She was very embarrassed about it and responded in kind. Later, they were walking down the street and she asked with embarrassment if pretending to be a kitten was not really necessary. Why didn't he tell her about it yesterday? He was also a little embarrassed, apologized and said that she tried so hard and it was very sweet. He didn't have time to finish because she squeezed his hand tightly and with a displeased look, loudly said that everything was completely wrong. He said that, for example, he couldn't take off her dress, so they're even. She was ready to cry from awkwardness and loudly said that his awkwardness was not even close to hers. He felt threatened by her and said in a confused tone that it didn't make anyone feel worse. When two people share something that is embarrassing with each other, their relationship only gets stronger. She calmed down a bit and said that if that was the case, it was his turn to tell her something embarrassing about himself. Yuika thought she understood perfectly well that her behavior yesterday couldn't be interpreted any other way. The dress she usually didn't wear, the perfume and the fact that they shared a bed. They miraculously survived the first and second descents. However, there was no guarantee that their next, third descent would go smoothly. She didn't want her feelings for her loved one to consist only of regrets. When they finally found them, she sighed with relief. However, then she saw what an unbreakable adventurer's spirit he hid within himself and fell in love all over again. Darling has a family for whom he's ready to do anything. She has a duty to destroy dungeons. They can't sacrifice what's most precious in the name of love, but she won't let go of this hand just yet. Rose said that around the corner is the house of relatives who are looking after Mari. Yuika was about to say something, but she saw her crying, ran to her and called her loudly. She called her sister, and she asked, "Is this the picture book she gave her? What happened to it?" She cried with a very sad expression on her face, and began to ask her for forgiveness. She hugged her and said that it was not necessary. She did not have to apologize, it was not her fault. Michi and Kolan came out of the house and started to bully her, but ran back when they saw him. She looked at them with a very displeased expression on her face and asked, "Were those two the ones who did this?" Mari continued to cry, agreed and said that she sat in the corner to read, but then they took the book from her. Morao opened the door and asked, "Have you deigned to come back?" She extended her hand and said that she was already wondering what all the fuss was about. It's stupid to take children at their word. Who knows what really happened there? Or maybe he wanted to argue with her? He took the coins out of the bag, denied it, and said that everyone just saw her children teasing his crying sister. He handed over the money and asked if she could ask them not to do it again. She just snorted and slammed the door in his face. She was unhappy about this and was about to ask something, but he immediately said that they would talk about it when they returned. He greeted Mari and said with a small smile that it was time for them to go home. When they returned home, Yuika loudly called Darling and said that they shouldn't give up so quickly. Why did he just let them go? He should have demanded compensation. He asked her to calm down and said that the pages were dirty. Then for now, he would thoroughly wipe the cover and then take it to a specialist to glue it. She was happy about this and with tears in her eyes asked, "Will this really help?" The protagonist agreed and said that they would go tomorrow for this. She asked if he always asked those people to look after her. He agreed and said that Murao was his only relative. She asked if the money he paid would be enough for a kindergarten, which would definitely be better for her, right? He said that, unfortunately, there was nothing like that in their city. He hugged his sister and said that children left without families either die of hunger or end up on the black market. He agreed. They didn't have the warmest relationship, but if something happened, at least she would be safe. She agreed with a worried look and wanted to object, but thought with horror that the deeper the group descended, the more danger the Sherpa would be exposed to. However, the lives of Darling and Marie were at risk from none other than her. MC called her with a small smile and told her that she didn't need to worry about it. He made his decision after carefully assessing the risks. Besides, they pay him so much that it's hard to jinx it. She said that they are close after all, and not just as an adventurer and a Sherpa. She didn't have time to finish because he refused and said that it was only his family's business. She was surprised by this and thought that she was pushed away, or rather, shown her place, so that she wouldn't take on responsibility. He said with a smile that, frankly, he plans to move to a big city so that Marie can go to school. So he's gradually saving money. If he adds to this the reward they will give him for the next descent, he will get just the right amount. Then she will finally be able to live without worries. Yuika said with a determined look that if money was the problem, then she can right now. She noticed his expression and thought that indeed, they are undoubtedly dating, but that does not give one the right to rely on the other for everything. He does not need alms and will not accept it. That's what his quiet smile told her. He decides for himself what to do. Most likely, he follows this motto, taking responsibility for his sister. After that, they will start a new life, and in this future which Darling so longs for, she is not there. Last evening, they were consumed by burning feelings. They clearly love each other, and yet this is only his family's business. This means he doesn't consider her someone close, someone he can trust with family problems. She loves him so much, but still remains a stranger. She looked at him with a determined gaze and thought that he will not live to see this. She began to take off her gloves and said that she believed that he was driven by the best intentions, but his words offended her to the depths of her soul. Ro, looking confused, called her name, and she threw her gloves on the table and with great embarrassment said loudly that therefore he should take her as his wife. He was even more confused by this, and she, with a determined expression, thought that this way her darling's problems would become theirs. The next morning, he was tied up in the Sherpa Guild and didn't understand what was going on there. The department employees tensed their muscles in front of him and said that the report on the dungeon dive was delayed. He wouldn't leave until he wrote it. They started dancing, and he apologized and said that everything would be done by morning. They snatched him from the house so unexpectedly, he didn't even have time to make breakfast for Mari. Gunji also tensed his muscles and said loudly, "There's no need for worries here." He pointed to the side and said that he should look here. The Sherpas brought her many different dishes and invited her to eat. One of them happily said, "Here are some sweets and juice. She can take as much as she wants. They have plenty." He'd already taken his sister with him, so she'd been to the Sherpa Guild many times. She also knew that these big men were actually kind. The guild leader also went to them and said they should stop. He also wanted to take care of her. Gima, looking displeased, said that they should calm down, otherwise they'd practically start fighting. She asked the employee to close the door, called him, and said that these guidebooks contained all the information about the labyrinths of the Tyros dungeon. According to him, they would fill in the gaps in the maps. He agreed to tell her everything that happened in the dungeon, right? Closer to midday, in the very center of the city, in the temple of the goddess Galatica, Barry, with a happy expression on her face, left the building and thought that she had managed to level up and even received a new ability. Perhaps I should check on the princess about the report. She froze when she noticed the protagonist walking along the road and instinctively hid behind a flower bed. She looked around and thought that the man walking ahead of him was the head of the Adventurers Guild. She was sure his name was Joe. But who was this woman? Why were they walking with them? She had a bad feeling, so she decided to follow them. She followed them to the building they entered, used the gift of Furin consciousness, and thought that here she received an invitation from the Tyros mayor's office to a dinner party at a first-class restaurant. She attached a magic mark to his back. Note: this gift allows one to hear sounds within a radius of the one on whom the gift technique is cast. She heard a restaurant worker say that they should go to a private room on the second floor. Their counterpart would be here shortly. After that, she heard a knock on the door and someone apologized to Baraman for being late. She heard Jima say that updating the map takes time. Barry thought she was from the Sherpa Guild. It was the voice of the woman who had passed by earlier. The mayor said that it turned out they had broken the diving record again. She closed her eyes and thought that she needed to focus on the conversation. The mayor said that they could sit down. There was enough food for everyone, so they didn't have to be shy. He already knows about the Twilight Sword in detail, doesn't he? He will be able to answer his questions. She thought with a serious expression, why would such an important person secretly obtain information about their team? A bad feeling didn't leave her. He said he was curious to know about the gift of the Phantom Needle, how many creatures this technique can control. MC said that he didn't know the exact number, about 10, but he could be wrong. She smiled at what she heard and thought that he had lied just now, in fact, much more.